Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the stream, bro. Just got home. And I'm authentically reaching out the olive branch to Australians. G'day, mate. Should be all right. Throw another shrimp on the barbie. That's I'm doing. See, authentically. Hey, big A, just voted in our Aussie election. It's a mess. But did you be honest with me? Nike Nonk. Be honest. When I opened the stream, were you like, oh, that's Australian? Were you convinced? Were you like, oh, wait a minute, where'd Atrioc go? Because there's an authentic Australian on stream. Because of the way I hit the accent so well. Good day, mate. Oi, a kangaroo. And is a kangaroo court just a regular court over there? That's very good. That's very good. Hey, good day, sir. Good day. I just finished recording the Patreon up of the podcast, and I just rushed home so that I could stream today. I have some real shit I want to talk about today. I'm going to get serious. I want to get real. I might not even cover the Australian election. God. I got real stuff I want to talk about, but I will vibe for a bit first. I want to see how everybody's doing. Hey, Pababa, thank you for the 25 months. 25 months of ... Now, are you telling me you haven't had a beautiful time in these 25 months? Let me look at your last messages, not from the day, but from 4/16, last time you chatted. You said, Boomer, I want my money back. Clancyville, Poggies, Glizzy, Gliz. And you're telling me you didn't get your money's worth for this stream. I feel like you were spitting. I feel like I've got a community for you. Oranji Parker, thank you for the 2 months. Still deciding if I'd rather be in the YouTube comments or a part of chat. Either way, I'm here. I mean, ideally, you are watching the video on YouTube, full retention, leaving a comment, then showing up to stream and buying a sub. That's the ideal. Albanese, is there live updates? Live updates, Australian election. Can you guys guess? This is going to sound shocking if you've watched my content. If you've watched my content, could you guys guess what the #1 top issue for voters is in Australia? Now, you probably think it's something uniquely Australian, like kangaroo attacks. Can't be housing, right? I mean, it's cost of living. It's cost of living. Cost of living, housing is the #1 issue in Australia. Shocker, dude. It's almost like the same thing is true of Canada or of America or of Europe or of... I'm Australian and I say it's not enough kangaroos to ride to work. You think your politicians need to institute some sort of kangaroo breeding program so that you have more roos to get to work. Get to work, by the way. Well said. Let's do a quick check here. Australians vote in elections shaped by cost of living, housing concerns. It's election day in Australia, where 18 million voters will determine who the next prime minister will be. Anthony Albanese is seeking re-election, and his challenger's Peter Dutton. Cost of living is the main election issue. Donald Trump also looms over the vote. As Australia, whose people value mateship of friendship and loyalty, is not spared from the U.S. president's tariffs. We're fucking up our mateship with Australia? That's one of the coolest things we have. I want Australians to call me mate. My Yankee mate. No. Nar. Not our mateship, bro. We have to get that. Flirt. Sorry, Big A, not till 2028. No, we got to be mates before then. It's C word from now on. Relax. I know that Australians can say it to each other, but when you say it outside of it, it's a little harsh, a little strong. Hey, Atrioc, today Berkshire Hathaway left a letter on my porch offering my parents a lowball offer to buy our house. Here's your opportunity to stop private equity and outbid them with that NVIDIA money. Berkshire Hathaway wanted to personally buy your house? Are you just making this up? Are you just using buzzwords? Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway is investing in single family real estate by buying your house directly. They got oil. But Berkshire Hathaway doesn't even drill for oil. I'm sure Warren Buffett's got his fingers in many pies, old dog that he is, and I'm sure there's real estate components, but I would not assume that Berkshire Hathaway would be sending you a direct letter. HR, do you think koalas deserve the right to vote? That's a great question. That's a really powerful question. And what I'd say is that the koala has long been a friend and ally to man. They're cute. They're cuddly. They eat the important... Do they eat bamboo? Or is that just pandas? Do koalas eat bamboo? Or just eucalyptus? Okay. I see. Famously not? Well, not famous. So you're telling me that pandas and koalas would get along because they don't compete over food. Of course you would befriend a koala. Well, what's wrong with a koala? Let's do a quick check here. Cutest koala compilation. Dude, somebody saying mid is diabolical. Saying mid is like, you're not rating the sex appeal of the fucking koala, bro. I think he's cute. I think he's pleased. I think he's, or she, I don't even know. And also, you guys shouldn't know so much about venereal diseases of koalas. That's just so weird. They're the stupidest animals ever. Counterpoint. I don't rate koalas on their intelligence. Now do angry koalas? Bro looks like a rat bear. They're so lazy they don't pull their weight. I'm sorry. Are we now under the impression that every member of the animal kingdom has to pull their weight? Like we're all in this together, and that the bears, dogs, cats, and birds need to be pulling their weight economically? I guess, what is the contribution to GDP that, like, koalas are giving? How much taxes do they pay? My cat pays rent. Do you know anybody who, because I had a coworker at Twitch that did this, who tries to set up a custom Instagram account for their pet to turn it into like an influencer? Has anyone had a friend in their life try to do that? It's so tacky. It's so tacky, dude. It's so cringe. It's so cringe. Like, just have your pet and enjoy it. Please do not try to turn it into a monetized social media. Is the camera unfocused? The camera only looks unfocused if your brain is unfocused. So you've been watching too many reels, brother. People with sharp brains, they see it all crystal clear. Big A, is now the time to send a typer's economic question? Normally I'd say no, but fuck it. What's your typer's economic question? I'll answer it. I'm feeling pretty good today because I had a really great recording of the Patreon for Lemonade Stand, and I felt like it was very fun, and it made me rethink something. So I'm going to talk about just what I've been thinking out loud today. But I will happily read your typer's question. Atrioc, my sub will end this month because I didn't work hard enough to afford basic things. I will do better for you next month, King. Are you saying that you... I'm sorry. Are you saying that an Atrioc sub is a basic thing, like a life necessity? And also you're saying you don't have access to debt markets? You say you don't have access to a bank or something? You can't take out an extra loan on your parents' house and buy a bunch of subs ahead of time? All right, let's see. Hey, Big A. Does it make sense to invest in the international ETF for a Roth IRA currently or continue a buy the dip mentality for the S&P 500? But okay, now you probably can guess my answer to this question in that I will always tell you I'm not going to invest for you. I'm not your financial advisor. If you ask me a direct financial advice question on which thing will go up, I'm not going to tell you because I don't know, number one. Number two, even if I were to give you my best guess, you are going to come back to me and be mad if it doesn't go the way you think. You'll check and be like, well, this one did better, this one did better, and I'd be mad. So I'm not capable or comfortable answering questions like that. I can only give you my broad takes, often humorous, on what I'm seeing in the news and in the markets, not necessarily tell you what to buy or sell. Should I invest all my savings into stream donations and merch? Now we're talking. Now we are getting something correct. Invest your savings into stream donations. Here's the thing. The reason I gave him that dumbass answer is because he didn't pay enough money. But if you throw enough money my way, you unlock a higher tier of advice where I tell you the secret guaranteed stocks that will print money. Do you understand how it works? That's why my longest tier subs are the richest people in this chat. Wait, speaking of stocks, how is that stock game going? Because Aiden was talking shit today, and I don't think he's not even ahead of me anymore. Bro gets one day on the board and was fucking talking mad-ish. I will say lemonade stand, brother. 4%, 7%, 9%? That's a business podcast. Are you doing any React Andy content? I'll like doing a vid. If you have a great React vid, save it till tomorrow. I'm doing Get Smarter Saturdays. Today I might look at the Reddit, actually. Not that there's anything amazing on there, but there's a few things that spark discussion that I'm happy to have. I'm feeling very open today. So if you have a question you've always wanted to ask, and you're like, I wonder if he's going to crash out at me, I'm not going to today. I'm not going to. I'm feeling very uncrash outable. That I finally had a good day where my routine was good. And I had some really good personal conversations with people that made me feel more hopeful. Here's what I'll say. I'm just going to get into it. Okay. I'm going to get into it. Because I don't want to delay. I want to talk about my main topic for today. My main topic for today is that I've been feeling kind of stressed over the past week and a half or 2 weeks. Now, part of that is I had a lot of guests living with me, and that throws off my vibe and my schedule, and I'm a very particular person. But I've had guests. I had my dad, and then Adish, and then Ari had guests here, and we had a lot of guests, okay? And so, but I've just been feeling some type of way about this existential question where I kind of realized, I'm talking a lot lately about, man, this thing from Trump sucks, or this thing from Elon sucks. And I just realized, man, like, no matter what, at minimum, there's 3.5 more years of this. There's like, at minimum. So I need to give space in my heart and mind and world for other things. I just don't want to talk about it that much. I know it's all important. I care about it, but I want to talk about other things because there's so many things in this world worth talking about. And when I focus on that, I end up in a spot where I feel like I'm almost repeating myself. I don't want to do that. I made my point. I think people know where I stand. I think he's a bad president. Okay. I think he's done a bad job. I came in with, I think, a pretty open mind, and I've been let down with low expectations. So but some people will tell me, and this is why I'm saying this. I'm saying this now. Some people are like, you have to talk about it, and you talk about it in this way because it's important. You need to, and I am just saying, I disagree. And I think actually one of the core things I can do is, well, when it's important to me talk about it, I should also talk about other things. And build a space where people can feel free to talk about other things they're interested in, and it doesn't become this, infinite feedback loop of the same thing. Now, people are saying play some fucking video games. I don't know about that particularly. What I will also say is when I'm happiest with my stream is when I feel like I'm doing what I'm excited about off stream. So if I was like all day at NVIDIA fiending to go home and play a video game, and then I go online and I play a video game, I'm doing what I wanted to do. And if all day I'm like reading something interesting, I'm like, oh, I want to talk about chat about that, then that's what I want to do. I'm not gonna fucking, I don't want to do anything other than what I want to do on stream. And so I felt like in the past week and a half, I was kind of like talking about news things that I didn't personally feel that excited to talk about. I was just doing them because it was like a big deal. So I feel like I'll always feel comfortable and happy if I'm just talking about what I'm interested in an honest, sincere way. And so that's what I want to do. And that's what I'm going to do. All right. I just wanted to fucking get that out there because we had a real good conversation about that with regards to Lemonade Stand, about how we want to like structure the show to be a little more conversational and casual and less like presentation-y. And I was thinking about what I like, and I was looking at my channel and I was like, yeah, this video does well, but like, do I feel great about what else? So anyway, this talk isn't too far off from how my roommate came out to me as a furry. So long story short, my fursona is that of a koala. Okay, that's what was all leading into this. But the bad stuff gets the most views. That's the other great thing. I think perhaps I don't know, fed into that. I was like, I talk about this. It's interesting. Well, then what's another interesting story about something Elon fucked up or something? But it's like, I was happy. I remember being over the moon. I remember telling Adish, I was like, dude, we're getting 100K views on a clip. It's like, holy fuck. I can talk about anything. And I'm like, why do I care if it gets, it already makes money, dude. I don't care. I have money set aside. The point is to make a life that I'm happy with and I feel good about. So, you seemed happiest watching Bionicle. It's funny that you say that because I feel like I was the most unhappy I've ever been on stream. Then when I was like 9 hours into that, I feel like I was fucking miserable. I'm cleaning the fucking fuzz off, dude. Lil bro trying to reach self-actualization. I can't. Nah, you better stick to basic necessities, Maslow. Lil bro better focus on food and shelter, bro. Lil bro thinks he's top of the pyramid. Better stay down to the fucking bottom. Better pick berries and shit. Let me get some guap. I want to buy a grill. Like a grill's grill, not a grill. I don't know what that means, bro. I don't know what that fucking means, bro. I have no fucking... Hey, big yeah, I'm visiting the US from the UK for 2 months. Pog. Should I be worried about things having changed since last time I came? I'm not the best person to speak about that. I think probably be fine. I'm in the first year of college. I'm currently undecided. I feel like I'm wasting this opportunity. I like the business economics stuff you talk about, but I fear that working in that space will be toxic. I know it's a personal question, but do you have the advice, or how did you decide on marketing as your major? I decided as marketing as my major because I naively thought that I was super into esports. I would watch Korean esports, and I was like, in Korea, they have stadiums and sponsors and TV channels. How do we not have that in America? Probably because we have shit marketing. That was my thought process. Maisie! Good to see you. Good to see you, Maisie. And so I was like, well, I just need to be a good marketer so I can make esports good in America. But it turns out that happened naturally without me. I didn't have to do anything. But I did lead to a job, I guess. You talk about birth rates, but you yourself have done nothing to contribute, while the real GOAT, Elon, is dominating in the marketplace of evolution. How can you compete? You're saying I need to have 15 kids or I'm not doing my part? In a way, I have thousands. You know, in a way. Maisie, how have you been? What's going on with you and Linkus? What's happening? Or just you? Fuck Linkus. All right, I already talked to Linkus. You're more like a fun uncle. I'm not your uncle. Can you teach me how to drive a car? Yeah, just hit the gas and close your eyes and let your spirit take you where it may. I told you happy birthday and you didn't say thank you, so we aren't friends. Okay, well, that doesn't jive with my experience. Did you tell me happy birthday and I didn't say thank you? Holy shit. Well, okay, but you told me to at midnight. Wasn't. You said happy birthday, bitch. I'm 8 minutes early, but it counts. All right, I'm going to write you thank you. Thank you so much. This means a lot. Pog champ. So I was 2 hours into your birthday? No, I don't think that's how it works. What if your future kids called you Peepaw? Would you hate them? I would hate my future kids because I would put all of my hopes and expectations of becoming an NBA star on them. And when they don't fulfill that, I will take out that resentment. Okay? That's what I would do. It's not that I would. Project Luca. You sound like my father. You're ready. Does anyone have a parent like that? Do you have a parent who had unfulfilled dreams that they put onto you that created weird expectations? You? Like, what was the dream? Golf? Oh, dude, you have no idea? Well, tell me. My dad thought I would be in the... Your dad thought you'd be a professional soccer player and is upset that you're not? My dad was disappointed in my lack of soccer skills, even though I tried for years since I was 8. Dude, athletics is a crazy one because, like, a huge part of that is just genetic. And then also, like, really early years coaching and, like, my dad wanted me to be the productive member of society, and now I'm in this chat. Okay. Okay, let's not. That's nuts. That's nuts. So bad? It's not so bad. You're in this chat. Back up, happy. I've always been expected a clutch of academically low key. Not like some aspiration. There's just an explanation. Yeah, that's more common. Is parents just wanting you to do well scholastically and putting a lot of pressure on you that way. But I mean specifically things like where a parent like wanted to be a basketball star or a soccer player or whatever and their dreams didn't pan out, so they're putting it all on you. They're trying to live vicariously through you and some achievement. Which sounds a little spooky. My parents, wait, we don't need to be smart now. We have A1. It's fucking true. I'm in a somewhat tough spot. I had an internship lined up this summer, first real career opportunity I've had, but it's contingent on me being enrolled full time. I'm concerned about taking on even more debt. I know this company's not hiring post internship. Is it worth it? Bro, this is, dude, I was joking about being your father. I don't know you well enough to know if it's worth it. I don't know the company well enough, dude. You're asking me like a Sophie. It's literally like Sophie messaging me and going, hey, I have 2 children and the Nazis are making me pick one. How do I choose? You are actually asking me a Sophie's choice. I can't do that. I can't. Who would you choose? If I were to, we could give you a more zoomed out question. And that is that, I mean, you didn't even tell me the industry, bro. There's really no way to know. There's truly no way to know. Here's what I'll tell you, let me give you some actual advice here, okay? My advice is not specific to your situation. It's that you probably have more information on this than anyone else. You know most about this job, who you've talked to, what your schooling's like, how your finances are feeling. And it's probably true that your gut is telling you the right answer. It's probably true that when you think about one option, you get a feeling in your fucking pit of your stomach that lets you know that's not the right choice. But you are asking for someone to give you the head answer that confirms your gut. So I would tell you to trust yourself. I think you've internalized enough knowledge to have a good feeling on the right direction. And if you're wrong, and you'll learn from it. You're young, fucking figure it out. But I think that's a good way to think about it. Generally, people know which way they want. Like, you know what a great way to do it is? Like, if you flip a coin and get the answer you don't want, and you feel like I should reflip, then you know you have an actual answer. You know it's not really 50-50. You know you have one that you're actually leaning. And that's then you know. That's then you know. What's up, Ask? How you doing? My dad's on a ventilator. They want to. Oh, this is an easy question. Yeah, yoink the plug. Ink. This is the stuff streamers can answer. This is easy. I can do 10 of these a day. If I, as a streamer, I'm fully aware. I'm able to like constantly answer these. But like it's the tough ones where it's like, do I take this internship or that internship? That's the one that's really the challenging one. I'm good. About to finish my degree in philosophy and politics. Originally wanted to take a master's degree in law to become a lawyer. I'm delaying a year because I don't know about the law. Aren't you studying to be a lawyer? Is it not knowing enough about the law the normal thing when you're studying? That's the point of going to school. You don't go there because you know a lot about it. It's because you don't. Is studying abroad worth it? Different for everybody, but I had a great time. If it's not going to like hurt you too much financially, I thought it was real important, real cool. I still think about stories from that time. It's cool to meet people from a different culture and a community, and often it's fun. Often it's fun, dude. I think studying abroad's cool. If you can do it, obviously, whatever, but I had a good experience. I had some bad experiences in Korea. I got way too drunk. I got homesick at one point. I was pretty down, but like I also worked through that. I also learned new things. I met new people. Guys, I see the album. I don't know that it's the right time for me to do a long album react, but I appreciate you making it, and we'll have to just find the right time. But it's not something I feel like I just want to just jump in. I need to like feel it. I need to feel it. I need to feel like it's something I feel good about and it feels relevant and all that. But I appreciate people making it. Maybe we can find the time to react to another Bionicles doc. Linkus, you and me, Linkus, we react together. That way it's a discussion. The last time was a problem because it was only me talking to myself. But if I had another person, we could really get into the deep nuances, the subtle details. We could quiz each other. It's Socrates and Plato around the... Do you guys know the story of Socrates? This is a drunk history right now. Like, Socrates was a guy in Athens, Greece, who truly was an annoying Redditor questioning everything. Like, he just would go around and question it. He'd be like, why are you the leader? Why is system set this way? Why are you richer than this person? Why are you... He would just question everything, and it made everybody pissed off. They would be pissed off. And so eventually it got to the point where he had questioned enough people about enough, like, supposedly true things, because he was breaking down the things they thought were true, that they killed him. They made him drink hemlock. They made him drink poison. But the thing is, they get to his trial, right? And he has it. They give him an out. All he has to do is, like, stop doing what he's doing. But bro is so Sigma, he starts questioning them during the trial. He starts fucking, he starts asking why. And then he fucking downs the hemlock and dies. And that he sort of created the whole idea of philosophers, that, or at least Plato's recollection of Socrates. Dude, that's so sick. I wish we could do that. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Your takeaway is not that Socrates was based for standing up for his principles. Your take is that we should poison people who ask a lot of questions. Your takeaway from that is like, wow, we poisoned him and he died and it worked. This will work in real life. Interesting. I do think there's some Redditors that we could stand to have extra hemlock for, but I think what Socrates is pretty based. Socrates was pretty big. He invented the whole concept of philosopher, which is really just dude that, gets high and asks questions. Down dutes are the modern day hemlock. You think when you confidently hit down vote, you're like making them drink poison. You've humbled the Socrates in the world of ideas. Interesting. That's interesting. That is a new, unique way to think about it. And like, here's another philosopher of our day. Why don't you Socrates nuts? That's like, what you're doing right now is like spreading ideas, and you have a cleverness to you that really is unmatched. Old Atrioc would have permaban him. I'm nice today. I swear to God, if you have a harder question, I'm nice today. I feel like I'm in a charitable mood. Probably because I slept well and I played basketball and I ate a good meal. That's probably why. Honestly, half the time I'm fucking cranky is because I don't sleep or I don't. Bro, broke glass in case of emergency. I'll get you to crash out. I think it's a complex issue. And while some people are in favor of nuclear energy, there's others who have different opinions. And I think with a reasonable debate, we can find an agreement that more clean energy is needed. However we figure it out, we'll find a way. On the topic of Socrates and the last lemonade stand, Socrates didn't want Plato to write down his speeches because he said the use of writing leads to people not being able to remember. Yeah, Socrates has a famous, I don't know about famous, but he has the quote about how writing things down is making people lazy. It's a great example of like how you should check yourself before you're like, oh, this new technology is just ruining everything. Because Socrates said about writing and is a little silly. And the old are always saying it about the young and the new technology. They're always saying that. And I have to remind myself of that when I have a bit of not a crash out, but I have I think a reasonable skepticism of, people using AI therapists and, and AI glazing everything. I think that's a reasonable thing to be critical of, but it's quite possible, perhaps even likely, that while we will have pain, human beings will figure it out, as we always have. We'll figure it out. We will get antibodies, social antibodies, to the worst parts of it. Sign on. I would love to talk about MMT, but not that I don't think I would crash out. I think I could do I think it's, how do I say this? I think MMT is very sneaky, to be honest. I think the way, especially the people who learned about it from Stephanie Kelton, I think she really does a very hand-wavy, used car salesman view of the world that really papers over the weaknesses. And so if you don't approach MMT discussions with your shit together and like ready examples, it's very easy for someone who's an advocate to not hear you. So I don't want to do it casually. It's not casually to me. I think it's something you really have to be. That's my take. That's my trying to be fair answer. How do you tackle asking AI questions on facts, knowing it'll make stuff up? Dude, the craziest thing is when AI, when it makes up quotations, when it makes up direct quotes, and then you're like, you point it out. I've done this where I'm like, hey, I don't think that quote is real. And it goes, oh yeah, apologies. I made it up because I thought it fit what you needed. Look, it'll just tell you. It'll just tell you. It's like, yeah, I thought that, it was like, I'm like, bro, I don't, that's not what I want from you. Whoa, you just corrected me. That took guts. Hey, Truck, since you're in a good mood, I can be vulnerable and open up. I got main character syndrome today. Could you check my messages, please? We got a main character, folks. We got a main character. The protagonist is in chat. Let's see what the protagonist has to say. Your message, I believe, is about Apple manufacturing 96% of iPhones in India. Let me break that down. My understanding is that Apple has announced they're going to move all iPhones sold in the US to be produced in India. That's their plan. They would like to have their supply chain out of China because Tim Cook, who's a supply chain god, has done a deep analysis of the world by watching My Marketing Monday and realized that America and China don't get along. Okay? Now, there was, I believe, a $900 million tariff bill that Apple had to pay this past quarter. So they are very much frustrated with tariffs and are doing their best to get around them and build elsewhere. But they can't build the whole supply chain in America for a variety of reasons. But so they're going to India, which is going to be at worst 10% tariff rather than so that's my answer to your question, is that I think one of the beneficiaries of China and America's tiff is India, because India is the place you can go to avoid the tariff. That still has some of the infrastructure and some of the lower cost of labor. India's coming up huge. Yeah, you could say that. I mean, India has its own. Here's one thing I wish more people would understand. I wish more people, not from America, would do this, to be honest. I feel like Americans, at least around here, are not all Americans, but Americans around here are pretty good at saying this. More people should be like, hey, my country's fucked up too. I'm not saying, listen, it's particularly bad right now with fucking Trump, but as I read more about the world, every country is having problems, dude. Real serious problems. Real serious change, real serious problems, real serious unrest. I wish people were like less nationalist and prideful about punching down and more like, hey, yeah, I get it. I mean, we're in the middle of even Nordic countries. Obviously, Nordic countries are doing the best in terms of most quality of life outcomes. But even Nordic countries, if you dig under the top veneer, off the top surface, there's problems. Things are changing. There's things that people are frustrated with. There's real problems. So I think that's a better attitude to have, is what I would tell you. Not enough bike paths, a true Nordic crisis. Okay, but as a Clancyville chatter, I love my country. I do think that Dan Clancy has built, if not a great country, a really great propaganda machine that keeps all its citizens in line. They certainly aren't speaking out, you know what I'm saying? They certainly feel. Atrioc, I've been laying some fire questions. Would love to hear your thoughts on one. Let's take a look at your fire questions. GBASP. Your fire questions are: growing up is realizing Socrates would be considered an idiot in the present day. That is just not true. That is just not true. That's also not a question. Not a question, not true. I was reading about Socrates today. He was well known for being ugly. Now it feels like you have a very personal beef with Socrates, and I'm not sure that's healthy, because he's long dead, and it feels like you should let that one go. It feels like you should let that one go. Serious question here. If Elon asked, oh, sorry. Hey, babe. Thank you. The grubbin. Oh, looks good.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it looks good. Thank you, babe. You want to say anything to chat?
No.
We're just talking about stuff, you know. We're just having conversations.
Farming for clips.
No, I'm just sitting up here thinking.
You know.
We're just having a conversation about life, okay?
I'm reading the comments.
I don't know. What do you think? Something you're thinking about lately? Like, what's on your mind, babe?
Well, you're trying to farm clips.
I'm not farming a clip. I just want to know, okay? Maybe it'll spur someone else to open up.
No. Oh, it's going too fast.
It is going too fast. Someone.
Like, do you think Socrates was hung as in, like, executed or like had a big hog?
He had talking about a big hog
Okay.
because he was poisoned. He drank poison.
Who would ask that?
Well, people are talking a lot of shit on Socrates. They're trying to see if the good parts,
okay.
you know,
Like he's got a huge hog, you know?
like a big old hog.
Yeah. How do I keep up with Atrioc's shenanigans? I don't.
I don't have that many
This
shenanigans.
is funny. This is pretty funny.
They called him Hogrites.
I am a big lemonade stand listener / fan person.
I feel like lemonade stands are pretty fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
I like it.
Fun.
It's like interesting stuff to talk about. Socrates is pretty good. Maybe they killed Socrates because he was too hung, and it made the nobles of Athens feel
I
emasculated.
can't keep up with this.
Doesn't it feel like jealousy? Ari, when Atrioc goes offline, does he say brand off? Don't laugh at that.
Yo, he doesn't.
Do not laugh
He
at
just
that.
like
That is
turns
not.
it off and he stays here for like an hour and then I don't see him.
That's true, actually.
Like you just camp here and it's very annoying. Brand off.
That's true. I turn out and then I sit here and I like scroll mindlessly.
Yeah, I don't see it. And then he comes out like at 1 a.m. and he wants to like watch Andor and I'm very tired. Alright, what are your thoughts on the delay?
That's true. I do want to watch Andor.
Wait, did GTA 6 like get announced and then delayed?
It got delayed like
What?
today to 2026.
That's crazy.
It's been so long.
Babe, it's been like
They
10
delayed it
years.
again.
That's like the only game I ever played like ever.
Dude, for a Zoomer's entire life, the presidential candidate has been Donald Trump and the game has been GTA 5.
Yeah, like that's so
You're
crazy.
frozen in time. You're frozen in time. You just get Trump and GTA 5 your whole life.
GTA 6 is scared of Silk Sun.
Minecraft,
I mean, we have so
Trump, and
inspired
GTA 5.
to look forward to. And I want to play Hades 2 on console too, as well.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be fun. Okay.
All right. Thanks, man.
Kind of just yapping.
Mm-hmm.
Not much going on. Ain't nothing funny going on here, you know?
I mean, there's like a general humor, you know? Just a general good vibe. I'm not frozen in time, bro. I'm playing Oblivion and Classic WoW. What are you talking? All right, man. Thanks for coming in. Bye.
Yeah, next time. I don't look like
Until next time. Adrian, I'm desperate to pick your brain. Can you pick my last question? Yeah, sure I can. I mean, we also should watch something right now because I do want to scarf down a little food. You said, due to the race to the bottom of shipping costs, FedEx has been paying drivers less. Do you think breaking up companies can cause harm to employees despite the good it does for consumers? In the short term, sure. If you're an employee at a company that gets broken up and that somehow leads to you being downsized or fired or paid less, then yes. In the long term, I think having a healthy competitive environment is the best way, not like a way, the best way to bring costs down, increase innovation, and give the best result to all the people of society, of citizens. Like, you know, the ideal thing is everybody else has healthy competition, but your company is fine so that you benefit, right? But employees are also consumers. And so really what they want is a competitive, healthy society. I got a cool philosophy vid. All right, fuck it. I feel like you could just record this chat for an hour and you'd have. This is not a good philosophy. This is epic rap battles of history. What is there? There's got to be a good. Is there a good like 10 to 15 minute philosophy vid? Interesting philosophy debates. The great debates of philosophy. Like, what is something?
Studying
What is this? This looks kind of funny.
ancient Greek philosophy. The expectation.
I should certainly consider the possibility.
The reality. I was expecting a battle of wits, but you appear to be unarmed. Your mom sucked me good and hard through my jorts.
Okay. I don't know if that's how it went in ancient Greece. I'm not sure that's correct. Every philosophical
This
ideology explained using only memes. All right, we're going to learn. Brain rot. We're going to learn. Every philosophical ideology explained using only memes.
Idealism. This ideology emphasizes the importance of ideas, mind, and consciousness in shaping and understanding reality. It suggests that reality is fundamentally mental or spiritual. Materialism. Contrasting idealism, materialism asserts that the physical world, matter, and its interactions constitute the fundamental nature of reality. It often emphasizes scientific explanations and empirical evidence. It's the belief that everything that exists can be explained through physical phenomena, such as the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, and other natural sciences. Rejecting
This sucks because the voice sucks. Loki, it sucks because the voice sucks. If the voice was different, it'd be better. Like I'm actually interested, but and I don't even mind the memes. What is this? This is a Juice World freestyle. I'm trying to like, what is this? A 33-minute video? No, I need something a little bit snappier.
Hi, welcome to
Philosophy Tube. What's the most popular video on Philosophy Tube? These are all too long, bro. Why can't philosophers get to the point? That's my philosophy. Get to the point.
When we think
The most savage philosopher of all time, 8-minute video? Wait a minute, he's a hero. It's a banger. 8-minute video, the most savage philosopher of all time. Let's hear it.
of philosophers, we generally imagine someone who writes long, complicated passages within the depths of their study. Maybe we even imagine the classy existentialist talking futility over a cup of coffee in the Saint-Germain. And then there's Diogenes, a homeless man who urinated on people, lived with dogs, and masturbated in public that we still talk about to this day. To put it simply, this guy cared little for the opinions of others. In the greatest of accounts, Diogenes would roast the philosophers and the rulers of his age, only to leave them dumbfounded by his unassuming wit. Where do we even begin with this man? Especially when he has no authored written material preserved and...
I feel like you can say this about any Twitch chatter. So far, I'm not sold. They all think they have the unmatched wit that is tearing down the philosophers of their age, but they're just fucking, you know, Socrates nuts or whatever. It's not, it's not as savage or impressive as they think. It's not.
And thus we must rely on second-hand written accounts of his absurd life. Since the events of his life are so blurry, let's lay out his philosophy, which is more of a doing than written system involving acting out what you believe in, more so than other philosophies. Many consider Diogenes to be the founder of cynicism, an ideology that is so unconventional, many scholars find it difficult to call it a school of philosophy. Cynics believe, as do the Stoics, that they have found the shortcut to virtue through their certain lifestyle, although they also address that this shortcut is actually really hard to attempt. We can see this difficulty in living your life as a cynic, as its very name suggests a dog-like existence. The word cynic in Greek is komikos, which also means dog-like. This naming either came from one of the first of the cynics' nicknames being similar to the word dog, or from Diogenes, who would shamelessly perform his private acts in public, and was later deemed Diogenes the dog. There are
That is crazy. He needs to stop drinking off in public. I think there's no philosophy component to that. And everyone calling him "you dirty dog" is not an impressive...
Specifically one account in which, when seen living amongst the dogs and appearing just as dirty as them, he was called a dog by passerbys. Not being one to contest such a statement as being a dog and his philosophy is quite virtuous, he embraced the name by urinating on the name callers, as a dog would. To not get sidetracked, the ethics of this philosophy are really quite simple. Live in accord with nature. Cynics see society as overcomplicating everything and instead embrace existence in nature as a dog would. Diogenes is quoted as saying, "Humans have complicated every simple gift of the gods." In this statement...
Was this guy just a furry? Just a dog furry? He just wanted to do everything like a dog. It doesn't make you... There's nothing magical about that. Pissing on people is not higher order thinking. Nothing you said so far is like different from do it like a dog.
We see that for Diogenes, his morality means returning to the simplicity of the natural world. Okay, now, let's get to his life. Diogenes may have originally helped his father, a banker in Sinope. Due to archaeological findings that have unearthed defaced currency in and around where his family operated, as well as his fleeing of the town, many believe the Cynic was exiled for attempting to devalue the currency. The Greeks and Persians had Sinope divided at the time, so their actions may have been political. According to text, Diogenes was told to deface the currency.
He's a counterfeiter that pisses on people. This is your goat? This is your philosophy goat.
By the oracle at Delphi, and after first taking that to mean literally deface it, later believed that the message was to deface or challenge the currency being social customs. This is where he went to Athens. It is said that when he came to Athens, he had a slave named Manes. Diogenes said, "If Manes can live without Diogenes, why not Diogenes without Manes?" and let him go, his first act of self-sufficiency. He was then attracted to the teachings of Antisthenes, although he was beaten by his hero with a stick after being a little too obsessed. Antisthenes is, according to Diogenes, the first cynic. It was also time for Diogenes to find some nice real estate. Diogenes lived in a clay wine jar on the street, his only possession a wooden bowl. When he saw a boy cup his hands and drink water, Diogenes threw away his wooden bowl, realizing how materialistic he had become. Then Diogenes heard about this shitbag Plato. Plato claimed that he could simply define man by stating one that is bipedal and featherless. Diogenes promptly plucked a chicken and stated, "Behold Plato's man." This led to Plato...
Damn, he did kind of fucking mog him there. He did kind of mog him. That is pretty based. That is like a rap battle bar that would get everyone going, oh. Like, that is a goated.
Revising his definition to include the term broad-nailed. Throughout his storied career in Athens, Diogenes became the talk of the town, wandering the street in broad daylight with a lamp, claiming that he was seeking good men, but only found vile and brutish creatures. Eating at a marketplace, a custom that was very looked down upon at the time, simply because he was hungry, living with dogs, and, of course, masturbating on the street. The last one, when he was tried before a court for it, led him to defend his act by stating, "If only it was so easy to end my hunger by rubbing my belly." Despite all this, he was quite well loved in Athens for his naked and pervy shenanigans, acting as a designated crazy uncle to the strict and serious Athenian populace.
Funny.
Then, One night, he was
That's
taken by
so
pirates
funny.
and sold as a slave in Crete. When asked by his owner what his previous occupation was, Diogenes, instead of freaking out, told him that he governed men. He either said this because he generally saw himself as a king in Athens, or because the phrase govern men and teach men were quite similar and this was a dad joke level pun. His owner loved this and hired him as a tutor to his kids in Corinth.
Oh.
Even then, he didn't stop. Upon hearing that an army was approaching Corinth, he witnessed the citizens of his village running and screaming in a frenzy. Not wanting to be left out of the fun, he began rolling his clay wine jar up and down.
He still had it?
When asked why, he stated that he was just being as useful as the citizens. This act simultaneously represented the futility of free.
What a fucking... Dude, give it a rest. Give it a fucking rest. What a fucking prop comic, dude. Really? Now's the time to do your fucking... What if someone doesn't ask you, by the way? You just fucking roll that shit around all day for nothing.
Out over things that one has little control over, a very stoic and Sisyphean concept, and that he was offering a solution that the citizens will have to move their homes to avoid conflict. Now we come to the more famous and well-known of Diogenes' incidents with others. During his stay in Corinth, Alexander the Great was said to have been passing by. Hearing of the strange qualities of our beloved philosopher, Alexander met Diogenes and asked him if there was anything he could do for him. When confronted by such an opportunity, a man of vast wealth and power, and arguably the most popular figure of that time period, Diogenes stated, "Yes, get out of my sunlight." To this, Alexander replied in admiration, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Diogenes, indifferent to the remark, retorted, "If I were not Diogenes, I would also wish to be Diogenes."
That's pretty based.
There is another far more savage account.
That's
of this
pretty
meeting.
based.
When Alexander spotted Diogenes searching through a pile of bones and asked why he would do such a
That's
thing,
pretty basic.
Diogenes stated that "I was searching for the bones of your father, but could not distinguish them from the bones of slaves."
Ooh.
Diogenes may have lived out the rest of his life tutoring, or he may have spent it on the streets of Corinth. Even his death is kind of ambiguous. Certain accounts establish that Diogenes simply held his breath and died. Some believe he became sick from eating raw octopus or suffering infection from a dog bite. Whatever finally took Diogenes may never be known. When asked about
That would be apt.
what he would like to happen to his body upon his death, he asked to be thrown over the walls of Corinth with a stick so he could battle the wild animals trying to eat him. When asked why he would need a stick as he will be unaware of anything, he said, "If I lack awareness, why should I care what happens to me when I am dead?" We see that even as he faces his mortality, Diogenes continued to push the customs of his period, a consistent advocate of simplicity.
I think he said, "When I die, make sure to, in a few thousand years, make a cool YouTube video about me so streamers can get react content." And it's kind of an honor to be part of his dying wish in 2025. It really is. He had a lot of foresight to say that.
As the highest virtue. Now, despite the admirable and historical fame of Diogenes, it should be not necessarily suggested to seek out this life. In modern times, Diogenes syndrome is a medical term used to describe people that are shameless, apathetic, socially withdrawn, and hold extreme self-neglect. This is a slight misnomer, as the self-neglect of Diogenes was, if anything, an act of high self-esteem, just in his own way. If he was around today, he may even state that the
So in a way, Asmongold is the modern day Diogenes. In a way, streamers are philosophers, and this guy, I'm sorry, but I call him balls and strikes like I see him.
The aforementioned syndrome is another product of social construct. Or he would
Oh, fuck. Nietzsche, the man who vibe checked God. Where's the popular ones here? Nietzsche, the man who vibe checked God. I'm kind of interested.
In 1882, a sickly German man penned these words: "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers?" This is perhaps Nietzsche's best-known contribution to popular culture, though his name has also been used by Nazis, motivational speakers, and edgy teenagers who think that he was a proponent of nihilism for some reason. Nietzsche is as famous as he's misinterpreted. And because of this, it's only natural to provide this, although still embarrassingly reductive guide to the life and philosophy of the man behind the mustache. Nietzsche was born in Prussia on October 15th, 1844, the exact same day in which King Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia was celebrating his 49th birthday,
Okay.
hence Nietzsche's first name. At school, Nietzsche excelled in Christian theology and created
As one
Germania,
does.
a music and literature club. He also learned Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and French in order to read the primary
That's
sources of his studies.
Crazy.
Nietzsche soon became obsessed with Friedrich Hölderlin, a long-dead obscure poet who suffered from schizophrenia and lived in a tower for 36 years straight, writing poetry about the simple things.
What a fucking life, dude. That guy would be a Twitch chatter today. Isn't that crazy? And his poetry would be copy pasta. In modern day, his poetry would be copy pasta, and he would be... It's just weird how there's parallels. You know, things rhyme. It rhymes throughout the years.
And playing the piano. Like most artists, people only liked his work after his death. He also became friends with another poet.
How many of you are locked in a tower right now that you haven't left for decades? How many of you are at the top of a tall tower that you've been locked into? I'm literally Rapunzel. Let's see.
And raging drunk Ernst Ortlieb, who would introduce him to the music of Wagner and introduce himself to an early death due to alcoholism. Mr. Ortlieb was found in a ditch a mere few weeks after meeting the young Nietzsche. Nietzsche studied theology and classic philology at the University of Bonn, and after only one semester, completely lost his faith. After reading Feuerbach's The Essence of Christianity, as well as his increasing admiration for the pessimistic Schopenhauer, Nietzsche found himself on the edge of nihilism. Impressively, Nietzsche was later...
So he's a college freshman atheist Redditor at this point in his life. At this point in his life, he's a college freshman atheist Redditor, and he's going to change the world.
Offered the
Before
chair
it
of
was cool,
philology at Basel at the young age of 24, and is still actually on record as the youngest tenured classics professor. Notably, before he moved to Basel, Nietzsche renounced his Prussian citizenship. He would remain entirely stateless for the remainder of his life. During this time, Nietzsche also served during the Franco-Prussian War. Scholars believe that his frequent visits to the brothels likely led to him contracting syphilis.
That'll do it.
Nietzsche then met Richard Wagner in 1868 and soon developed an absolute man-crush, due largely to their shared interest in music and Schopenhauer.
God, what a hairstyle.
However, Wagner became a little too mainstream for Nietzsche later on, championing German culture in his music with an indulgence that sickened him, so he broke their friendship. Nietzsche was also suffering from poor health at this point. He was nearly blind, had terrible migraines, violent indigestion, broken bones from horse riding, and carried various diseases. Due to this...
I'm not religious, but I could see how someone who was formerly religious would have all this and then say that God is dead. You know, you get dealt this many bad cards, you must be like, there's not a big man upstairs looking out for me.
He resigned from his chair in 1879. Nietzsche's years of independence were very productive and sound quite nice, really. Living off of his pensions, he would travel to Switzerland in the summer and to Italy and France in the winters. He would begin with Human All Too Human in 1878 and would create a major work each year until 1888.
That's crazy.
He also met the love of his life, Lou Salome. In fact, he liked her so much he proposed to her 3 times. Although Nietzsche never did get a yes, nor really any non-platonic affection, he did stick around, and both he, Salome, and his best friend Paul Ray would tour the countryside looking to set up a commune.
Bro, no wonder. El Riz got triple threat diseases.
Unfortunately, this would never come to fruition. Nietzsche was a...
Dude, he's on LiveJournal right now. God is freaking dead. God, fuck my Chungus life. God is dead. She didn't even fucking write me back.
Eventually abandoned by his friends when his admiration for Salome became far too much to bear. After this, he became hooked on opium and lived in isolation in the mountains, writing Thus Spoke Zarathustra in 10 days. These were very sad and lonely times for Nietzsche. His books weren't selling, and he was unable to obtain a job at a university. Meanwhile, his sister traveled to Paraguay with her anti-Semitic husband and attempted to establish a new Germany. Nietzsche thought this was very stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the midst of this dark time, Nietzsche found the strength to publish many of his books on his own dime, and he even saw his health improve. However, on January 3rd, Nietzsche reportedly witnessed a horse being flogged in a street corner in Turin, ran to the horse, threw his arms around its neck to protect it, and then collapsed. This moment, although not entirely proven to be something that actually happened, generally marks Nietzsche's gradual decline into madness.
Okay.
He would begin to write letters signed as the Crucified One or Dionysus, and would command the German emperor to go to Rome to be shot.
Okay.
Sadly, after 2 strokes and pneumonia, as well as a plethora of mental issues and disease, Nietzsche passed away in 1900, almost entirely obscure, with very few friends and a sister who would change his life's work to reflect her own agenda.
What?
You're probably wondering what sort of philosophy could emerge from a guy who lived such an eccentric and depressing life such as Nietzsche.
I didn't know he was totally
one of his
unknown
greatest
during his life.
contributions is his persistent skepticism. Not only did Nietzsche criticize religion and attack previous philosophies, no, his critique launched an attack on the very central aspects of morality, down to the seemingly universal values of good and bad. In Nietzsche's time, morality was no longer attached to religion, but instead was considered to arise from rational thinking and reasoning.
Okay.
However, Nietzsche criticized this view, arguing that such rational morals were still deeply entangled with religion and historical
I
continuity.
guess who are the thinkers of... It just feels like this guy in a different time, like if it was today, nothing he... everything he said would seem so just normal online behavior, just like angry guy online.
Contingencies. In fact, in the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche provides 3 treatises devoted to examining the evolution of central moral ideas. Nietzsche argues that our modern form of good versus bad actually happened due to an ancient slave revolt in morality. The masters or elites believed that they were good due to their nobility or exclusive virtues that could only be obtained by those in certain elite classes, such as courage in an elite military class. The slaves were powerless and unable to be good, and so came to resent their oppressor. In order to reclaim power, the slaves devalued everything their masters had, and that they could not have, and therefore vilified their oppressor, claiming them to be evil, making the humble lives of the slaves good. The slaves would argue that the causes behind the master's power are evil, and that humility is voluntary rather than something the slaves were forced into. Nietzsche writes, "Our morality amounts to a vindictive effort to poison the happiness of the fortunate, instead of a high-minded, dispassionate, and strictly rational concern for others." Hence, Christianity and democracy for Nietzsche are little more than universal extensions of slave morality due to their obsession with freedom and equality. Notably, his reading of morality doesn't make our idea of good versus evil sound all that rational. Instead, democracy is simply seen as the child of Christianity, according to Nietzsche, by which that is just an extension of slave morality, a morality based upon the erosion of power through jealously taking down the powerful. Here, the rise in European materialism, the popularity of secularism, and the advancement of the sciences, including the theory of evolution, led to Nietzsche's harrowing conclusion. Because the belief in the Christian God has become unbelievable, everything that was built upon this faith, propped up by it, grown into it, including the whole of our European morality, is destined for collapse. God's death then welcomes an era without values. Everything that was thought to be sacred and eternal is now seen merely mortal and arbitrary. Nietzsche believed that the death of God will lead to the loss of a universal perspective and truth, and subsequently, nihilism.
I see.
Most people focus on this aspect of Nietzsche's argument, claiming that he is a nihilist or advocate of nihilism. However, here's what he has to say about nihilists. A nihilist is a man who judges that the real world ought not to be, and that the world as it ought to be does not exist. According to this view, our existence, action, suffering, willing, feeling, has no meaning. This, in vain, is the nihilist's pathos, an inconsistency on the part of the nihilists. This inconsistency is the fact that the nihilist is still willing or wishing or valuing something, even if that something is nothingness. Beyond this error, Nietzsche also doesn't really think this nothingness is something.
Just tuned in, don't know what's happening. All I know is Atrioc is putting them liberals in their place. I'm having a live debate with a well-known liberal, Nietzsche, today. And I'm going to tell him, he's talking a lot of shit about God. But you know who fucking makes the sun rise in the morning? God. Checkmate.
Something worthwhile. For him, what makes the human species amazing is not what we believe in or value, but that we can value to begin with. Nihilism is the greatest crisis we face, and hence requires the greatest of values to recover from. But wait, what about the whole pleasure versus pain system as a basis for morality? In The Last Man, Nietzsche imagines the utilitarian man. The utilitarian man spends his days maximizing pleasures and minimizing pain, something that we can now probably call the modern lifestyle.
Right, smoking
However,
weed,
Nietzsche
playing
points to the fact
PS5.
that pain is usually required if one is to do anything worthwhile. He believes we'll suffer either way in life. We can either let life make us suffer, or we can make our suffering, channeling it into something we find purpose in.
Okay.
For him, the hedonistic man is a pathetic man who is simply content and nothing more. Sure, it's
Okay.
a solution to nihilism, but not one that Nietzsche is really all that a fan of.
Okay.
Here is Nietzsche's solution to nihilism, the Übermensch, or Overman. He believes that the Overman will be the next stage in evolution and will be the creator of new values that we cannot even imagine. The Overman shall be the meaning of the earth. Man is a rope tied between beast and
This is Twitch chatter shit. It's like I'm so sad about scrolling TikTok and smoking weed and I feel depressed. I want to be a Giga Chad. This is just lonely Twitch chatter worldview.
Overman, a rope over an abyss. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end.
He would be looks maxing.
Now, this is kind of extreme and not entirely useful for those who are suffering from hopelessness and nihilism. How can you deal with life suffering now without relying on...
Do you guys think Nietzsche would be a good VTuber? Like, he probably could do the entertaining part of stream, but obviously, yeah, the problem with the... So you think he could, like, VTube? With a voice changer. Like a higher pitched ayaya type voice changer.
becoming the next stage in human evolution. Nietzsche, who personally struggled with depression and nihilism, had much to say about living life to the fullest, even in the face of meaninglessness. Firstly, he suggested to love our fate.
Nietzsche.
He writes, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who makes things beautiful. Amor fati. Let that be my love henceforth.
Don't call me a fatty, all right? Just because I had a big meal. I want to watch a video about... I want to watch a video about something else. And that video is... like, you know, it's so obvious what I'm thinking, and I'm just not clicking, but I'm thinking about it. Oh, there's a...
China is the
Wait, there's a follow-up here. Let's watch this. China!
world's second largest economy, the second largest supplier of products to the United States, and the second largest foreign holder of U.S. debt.
So China is actually a bigger financial power than it looks like on the surface.
President Trump is using tariffs to address China's dominance. The White House has suggested that tariffs on some Chinese products may reach up to 245%. In January 2025...
Thing about me, I just love seeing Xi Jinping smile so much that I'll gladly pay the tariff. Okay? Because I know it'll make him happy to buy a Chinese-made product. So I will pay above and beyond. Because to me, it's just a better... It's just my friend over there. It's a smile tax. Yeah, call it the smile tax, dude. Because I know he's probably frowning when he thinks about me not enjoying protect his smile. Do it for him.
The average U.S. tariff rate on Chinese exports was about 20%. By the end of April, this rate shot up to about 124%.
Yeah, okay.
Which means the cost for U.S. companies importing goods from China has more than doubled for now.
Okay.
We've already raised tariffs to such a high degree that with time, trade will go to zero.
It is a very uncertain period of time, so a lot of businesses are having difficulty planning around that changing landscape.
Yeah, but you can figure
The
it out.
fact is that both sides need the other.
The escalation this spring made markets panic. Trump is now ready to negotiate.
I'm not going to say, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice.
In May, the Chinese government indicated that it's evaluating the possibility of trade talks with the United States.
China is sending strong signals, signals that the games that we are playing, which are tariff games and supply chain games, for them it's about survival.
Here are some of the ways that China could retaliate against U.S. tariffs.
Okay, one retaliation they could do that would really fuck things up is if Xi Jinping stopped personally sending me the 30 grand he sends me every month to be a shill for China. I think if he cut that off, that would really be like a fucking horrendous retaliation, because that is a huge part of my local economy. And I think it would be poor. But he's going to explain Black Ops 2 story, maybe.
The U.S. government is over $36 trillion in debt.
Okay.
China is one of many foreign countries holding that debt.
Chump change.
The U.S. borrows money and goes into debt by issuing treasury securities. Entities in China have been buying these securities for decades. These holdings give China some influence over U.S. financial markets.
All told, China's holdings are now 4% of GDP, of our GDP. That's big enough that if they sold it really, really quickly, and if the Federal Reserve just did nothing, that it would have a short-term impact.
But the Fed doesn't always intervene.
Okay.
People who need to finance homes could feel the impact. In April, as news of tariffs spread, yields...
First of all, what they don't understand is that Americans don't want homes. We want homies. Okay, it's a friendship crisis. We will gladly live on the street as long as we have our friends with us. And I think we're talking about the wrong thing. That's why I'm thankful to have you guys.
Yields on 30-year and 10-year Treasury bonds increased. Rates for consumer loans, like mortgages, shot up alongside them.
In theory, if China wanted to try to tank the bond market, what it would do would be to take all of the treasuries that it owns and dump them on the open market at once. And in previous financial crises, particularly in 2008 and in 2020, when there's been such a crisis, there is often what is referred to as a...
He says from his home. You think I'm in my home? I am currently on the street. This is a green screen I've set up behind me, and I stream remotely. I just move from place to place. So it's actually crazy that you'd say that. And I'm living the Diogenes life. Look at all those books, though. I don't even know what a book is. Has China recovered from their Evergrande cycle? Not that I need to get crazy into it, but just like a quick understanding here is like this. Imagine if the we'll go white bar here. Imagine if this red bar is real estate, okay? And then this blue bar is exports. Okay? So China's real estate, as it has been, is like investment. So as real estate investment has collapsed, they've been tripling down on exports for things like EVs, batteries, solar, things like that. So China's more reliant, like their what you'd call current account surplus, exports more than imports, has never been higher. They've never imported less and exported more, which is, frustrating other countries as they've gotten even higher market share of all global manufacturing. So China's very reliant. Like China, if they can't get other countries to buy their goods, is actually in a real tough spot. Like they need exports to grow. They're trying to grow their way out of this bubble deflation through exports. So this is very, very important. So far, it seems like they do have buyers. Even if America's not a buyer, they have buyers across the world. But like this is life or death almost. This
flight to quality. So a lot of folks feeling suddenly very risk averse try to invest them in the safest asset, which is in fact US Treasuries. The weird thing is that didn't happen. And that prompted a whole bunch of speculation that maybe either China or Japan were dumping bonds.
But experts do not believe that China has played this card, at least not yet.
Nah.
I think what we saw recently had very little to do with China and more to do with others who are really questioning the good faith of owning.
This guy's got some good books. I got quite a few of these books. I got choke points here relatively recently.
U.S.
But what I got to say is, why have all these books but no shelves? Who organizes their book? Like, this looks more like a set, bro. You got a fucking plant on top of these three. You can't even see these two. This feels very performative. There's like a CNBC thing over here and a White House thing here in my garage.
That these days.
Yeah, he feels surrounded by the books. He feels like he's a bookseller in a garage.
You know, for China, though, the signal is Trump is paying attention to the bond market. Quite frankly, it's great for China. They may not even have to fire that gun, because when others fire it, people assume that it's China or think that China may fire it and then further imperil the U.S. situation.
That said, China's government has other tools it could use against the U.S. For example, China supplies 60% of the world's rare earth elements. These elements are crucial for modern technologies in defense, alongside oil refining, electric cars, and wind turbines.
We're starting to see some export controls put in place around things like gallium, germanium, antimony. And the Chinese have a long list. Lithium is another. And here's where the U.S. is extremely vulnerable, because we still rely a lot on China's supply chain.
This is why Aiden is doing so fucking well in the fucking Doug stock competition, because he invested in this like penny stock company that scrapes the ocean for rare earth metals. And now that China's like export restricting, suddenly they fucking 100% up.
For some of the elements that we need in our defense sector.
And this is a case where finding a substitute for those critical minerals is going to be extremely costly.
The higher tariff rates on China slowed activity at U.S. ports down sharply. There are now concerns that a supply shock is inbound for the U.S.
Some businesses are saying we're going to hold off as long as we can, and they're paying higher storage costs.
It's going to be interesting to see, because like there very clearly is a slowdown at ports across America. There's just not boats in the ports. There's not truckers delivering good. There's just, it's like hitting now. But we haven't seen like empty shelves or anything yet. But there's this big lag effect that like they're saying hits by like May 10th. That's what they're saying. But I got to see it, I guess. But that's what it feels like. It feels like the slowdown is like about to hit from this trade disruption. In 2-3 weeks. Yeah. I mean, mid-May is my understanding, is whenever like that's when the lag effect of the trade slowdown, because in response to like upcoming tariffs, everybody pre-bought a bunch of shit. Like there's a ton of warehouses in America stuffed full of imported Chinese goods ahead of the tariffs. Because they thought, all right, we'll pre-buy a bunch of stuff. We'll use that tariff-free, and we'll try to outlast the tariffs. But if they keep going, I mean, the slowdown is now real. Hot girl tariff summer is a perfect summary of what I just said.
Our other clients are trying to move to third countries, right? They're determining, well, while there may be a global tariff on countries in Europe, on other countries in Southeast Asia, or more broadly, they're wagering that those tariff situations are going to be more favorable than China.
Products imported from China tend to be cheaper.
You think Trump backs off once shortages hit consumer stores? It's weird because they asked him about it and he said, so what? There'll be a fewer dolls on the shelf. And maybe the dolls will be a little bit more expensive. We don't care. But it's like, I think it's more than dolls. But we'll see. I mean, I actually, it's very tough to model. You don't know how it's still going to play out. It's like such a fucking incredibly global supply chain problem. I don't know how it'll play out.
Than those made in the U.S.
The Chinese business model is predicated on selling subsidized goods into the U.S., so I am sure that
I don't think anyone has ever looked like they have a stick up their ass more than Scott Besson. He looks like the evil principal in a Disney Channel movie. I again think he's the only one with a brain in the administration, but he is tough to like. He just has this. Yeah, it's too stiff or something.
that they will come and want to de-escalate.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary, a member of Trump's cabinet, has argued that the American dream is not about access to cheap goods.
Contrary to what the Secretary of the Treasury said, Americans are actually pretty happy with having cheap goods. And so as a result, we buy a lot of them, and therefore we've been running this persistent trade deficit for a while.
China's trade surplus remains sizable, despite shrinking since...
Is it my fault, folks? I was born in 1991. Doesn't it feel like we were having a no deficit, and then I came around, and now suddenly we're fucking... Did I will say that every year of my life, I've been importing billions more of Chinese goods. Caught. I'm sorry. Did I fuck up the deficit? I love Chinese goods, bro. Sometimes I'm just buying shit. Do you guys ever just do like retail therapy? Do you ever buy like $600 billion worth of Alibaba goods just to feel something? Drop shipping. My wife does.
Tariff rates first rose in 2018.
A lot of companies benefited from it. Most consumers benefited from it. I mean, Apple would not be as profitable if it wasn't able to make all its iPhones in China. And I would throw in, like, look, a lot of the winners on the corporate side have resisted, frankly, contributing to...
They included this?
Winners.
They included just because you have the TISM cat photo in this stock footage? Scroll.
On the corporate side, have resisted, frankly, contributing to our society in ways that would make it easier for us to help those who've been left behind.
Exports. Let me guess. Beef, soybeans, corn, Hollywood movies. What else did I talk about? Boeing jets. These are the things that China's impacting.
China was the third largest destination for U.S. exports in 2024. From China's perspective, imports from the United States are big business, but it has other options.
China basically told its state-owned oil and gas companies, you're not going to buy any U.S. natural gas. And we got news that China had told its state airlines,
Boeing jets,
that they can't take delivery of Boeings that they've already ordered. If China really wanted to play nasty, they could say, we're going to limit exports of...
It's kind of low-key petty on China's part to not take a plane you already ordered. Because you already paid for it, bro. Like, don't buy new Boeings if you're trying to be some type of way. But don't waste the plane. It's like wasting food is what it feels like. It's like you bought the food, eat it.
iPhones. You could squeeze Tesla, both limiting its sales in China, but also making it much, much, much harder for Tesla to get parts and kind of squeeze their Chinese operations. You can do that for other companies too. So China has a lot of levers.
As well, we saw additions in China of what they call the unreliable list. Basically, a list of entities in China that have a lot of difficulty doing business there when they are added to that list. There are restrictions on investment, on import and export activity. So it's their equivalent of a blacklist of U.S. companies. So I'd say energy and agriculture are probably the two most impacted industries on the export side of the house.
So the agricultural sector, particularly...
All right, so full disclosure, there's only like one U.S.-based consumer company that I've invested in China. This is not financial advice. Don't invest in it. But I've invested in the Domino's branch of China. Because there's no, they've openly said they have no restrictions on fast moving consumer goods like that, fast food. Like they have no problem with that. That's not an area there. And Domino's is so fast growing and has good margins and it's doing pretty well. I mean, it's done pretty well so far. I read a good report on it from a hedge fund, honestly. It was like this fucking 40-page PDF. And it was about opportunities they see in China. And the Domino's one was interesting, so I looked into it more and I was like, I'll take a risk. It's not like it's not a big bet that I'm having, but just full disclosure. It reminded me of this because it's like one of the key parts of the thesis is like, hey, US and China are going to have problems. A lot of important industries are going to get restricted. Pizza's not one of them. Pizza's like the only one you can fly, dude. No one cares. There's no critical important pizza industry.
Agriculture in red states will find themselves at some point, the longer this goes on a list. So soybeans.
You know what? The world's so crazy. Tomorrow, Xi Jinping could say that fucking stuffed crust is national security secret. And fucking nationalize all the fucking Domino. Like, I'm not saying, who knows, dude.
Of course, was the big one in 2018. We're likely to see a revisit of that. And here, it's particularly painful because since the first trade war, many of our soybean farmers have spent so much time trying to rebuild their relationships in China, bring back some of the market share that they lost to countries like Brazil, and it's likely going to be hit again.
The countries that face higher tariff rates have tight deadlines to negotiate with Trump's team. That's straining political relationships that were built over.
It's fucked up because if we were still able to export soy to China, we could play the long game. And if we exported enough soy, they would become soy boy beta cucks. And that would allow us to win any conflict. But because they're cutting off our soy exports, we're just stuck with a bunch of soy in our country. That's going to drive down the price of soy. And then we're going to have cheap soy in all our food. And that's going to fuck us. We're going to become the soy.
Decades.
One thing that would give me pause is if you saw a much stronger relationship form between the European Union and China in response to the Trump administration's trade policies.
Me too.
The Trump administration has burned through an awful lot of goodwill in the international system. The reason the dollar persists as the global reserve currency is at this point is not because of any real, fondness or American soft power. It's because of just the weight of history.
Even 3 months ago, before the reciprocal tariffs, I think a lot of countries in the world would have been on the side of the United States. China has been.
This is the ultimate thesis of my video. I'm glad they're saying this. I feel like I got comments that didn't understand that at all. They were like, oh, you're just glazing China or whatever, or that you fucking hate. I'm like, dude, I'm American. I cannot become Chinese. Xi Jinping's not going to take me in. I am proud of my country in a broad, macro, lifelong sense, and I want what's best for it and the people in it. But you can't deny that, Trump specifically is just blowing any advantage we had. Just blowing it. Just I think the analogy that my Chinese friend made, that Xi Jinping is playing with plumbers. I think it's appropriate. I feel really strongly about that. I don't think he's doing everything right. I think there are many things to be critical of China for, but it feels small beans when we're blowing it so much. That's how I feel. I just feel like we're blowing it. We're blowing it. And which is why, it's funny I'm talking about it today, but I don't want to talk about it too much because it's like almost stressing me out. Like, why do I keep repeating it? I said it. Well, what happened with Warriors? Wait, I just quick check. Sorry, Warriors, Rockets. Rockets winning. Looking like we're going to a game 7. Uh-oh. Or wait, is this a game 7? No. It's 3-2. Okay. Do you think that EU will suffer if it makes trade deals with China being flooded with cheap goods, especially manufacturing countries like Germany? I think that's a really interesting question, in that I think my answer would be that Germany would suffer the most. If there was an EU trade deal with China, a lot of EU countries would benefit from access to a broad variety of cheap goods. But Germany, as a manufacturer, as the manufacturing heart of Europe, would be the most negatively affected. So it's tough. I don't know how they would do that. I don't know how they would.
A very difficult trading partner. There was, and I think there still is, a real concern that trading with China just means letting your own industry get wiped out.
China's president, Xi Jinping, visited Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia in the weeks after worldwide reciprocal tariffs were announced. He called for joint efforts to push back against, quote, unilateral bullying from the United States. China also promised to retaliate against any nations that cut deals with the US to the detriment of China. China's position in the world grew when the United States lobbied for China's entry into the World Trade Organization in the early 2000s.
Okay, I just want you to point out, when did this video come out? 11 hours ago? They're kind of just beat by beating, dude. All right? They don't have my little hat in there, but it's like the same articles. It's the same fucking... This is the same fucking... There's not anything in this video that I didn't say, and I added more. There's no hes. They're going band for band.
With hindsight, I would not support China's entry into the WTO. I think it's ended up causing more problems than it has solved.
China has sent out loads of inexpensive products over the years, enabled by low wages, fewer safety standards for workers, and looser environmental regulations, hollowing out the manufacturing base in countries like the United States. Some see Trump's move on tariffs as long overdue.
There are many of our clients who are very supportive of higher tariffs. These are, largely domestic manufacturers or producers that have felt for a long time that their products are unfairly competing against foreign imports.
Time will tell if the plan works out.
Given how the U.S. government...
I feel like this is still not making the point clear, though, which is that even if you believe all of that about China, and I think there's some truth to that, and you think it's just impossible to pay American workers a fair wage and compete, so you need a tariff on certain aspects of Chinese manufacturing. If you think that's true, you still have to do it in coordination with allies. That's just not, it's not possible to do it alone, especially without pissing off all your, do you know what I'm saying? It's not possible. And so this video is not harsh enough on the fact that that has been done backwards. Which is like truly the biggest fuck up of it. I did not know China was moving manufacturing jobs from the U.S. against the American company's will. Okay, again, that is... I don't like that line of thinking because it's like the... it's like if the company was nice, they would have kept the jobs. But it's a competitive environment. It's a competitive environment, and your competitors are doing it. They're offloading like once the WTO deal is signed, it's essentially free trade. So they can just make it cheaper there. If you don't do it, your competitor is. So I would say you would want to either not enter them into WTO without restrictions, or you'd want to have tariffs if that's what you wanted to avoid. Who pushed the WTO agreement? Yeah, I mean the American government, but not the American company. Like the small manufacturer in America is caught up in a system bigger than they can understand. And the fact that they're being pressured to offshore to China is not like their individual moral fault. They're not like the one that's like, yeah, I just fucking hate my workers. It's, it's not an individual responsibility situation. It's, there was a House episode about this? There was actually.
Government, particularly CBP, Customs and Border Protection, who's on the front lines trying to administer this. Do you have the manpower capabilities to do this effectively? My answer to that is I do not believe that we do. If we do continue to go longer in this trade war, we're going to see greater and greater challenges.
That I fully agree, dude. I think we're not talking enough about the fact that, dude, tariffs aside, all this aside, like the amount of smuggling is going to go up astronomically. In phase one, they haven't really figured out the right routes, the right people to bribe, the right whatever. But like we're just setting up for enormous smuggling and like mislabeled goods and like putting the wrong country tag on Chinese goods. All that stuff is happening already now. I mean, I talked about South Korea reporting it. South Korea, against all odds, snitched, dude. They just said, hey, like there's a bunch of people in our port putting fake South Korean stickers on Chinese goods to sell to America. They admit it, which is a cool ally thing to do, I guess. They didn't benefit from it. But it's going to happen all over. That's happening. The routes are being built now. There's money in it. So it's wild to think that you can just pull a Napoleon, dude. Talk about this on the podcast, but like, in Napoleonic times, Napoleonic Wars. How do I draw Europe? Let's just do a box again. This is Europe, aka France, because he owned basically all of Europe. And this is the UK, aka the one country that no one can ever conquer. Every time someone gets all of Europe, they're always stopped by this tiny fucking little bit of water after this channel. I guess the Romans did it. The Romans did it. True that. But a lot of times they get stopped here. Anyway, so Napoleon, he can't quite invade and conquer the UK. Or I guess England at the time. So what he does is he does a thing called the Continental System. Continental System. Where every single country in EU has to promise they're not going to buy from the UK. It's all the ports are closed. You can't trade with the UK. But of course, every single individual country is like, you're right, Napoleon, we won't do it. But when he's not looking, they do it. Because there's money in it. Because the UK makes a lot of stuff. They have a ton of factories at the time. They're the China of their day. And so they're actually selling all over. And there's tons of like crackdowns, and Napoleon will show up and like, hey, let's do a crackdown. But then while he's cracking down here, they're selling over here. And like, this was just a huge, expensive failure. This attempt to crack down on UK trade. And I feel like there's a really strong parallel to what Trump is trying to do with China, especially with no allies. Yeah, like we're going to see obviously a bunch of exports from Mexico go up mysteriously. And it's like, maybe perhaps Chinese goods are being sent to Mexico and then being resent to America. Like maybe perhaps that's happening. And all that's going to be really, really hard to enforce and really hard to stop. And so, again, the best way is really not these top-down tariff rules. It's like bottoms up becoming more competitive. If you have to subsidize your own American industry, then so be it. But like, if that's what you want to do, if you want us to be better at making chips or making EVs or whatever, finding a way to make us competitive is a lot better than finding a way to try to like stop other people. Imagine Trump opening a shipping container of PlayStations from Mexico. Just personally? For a big party he's having or what?
More chaos at ports, slow entry times. You have to always ask yourself, can it be achieved with the current set of resources and manpower?
I think, here's one thing I'll say. If I could think of one job that Donald Trump would be God tier for, it's unboxing YouTuber. I think he'd be so much better at that than president. If he could open up a new product, talk about how beautiful and great it is, and just loudly read the specs and show it off, I think he would be actually unstoppable. It's the greatest product. Yeah, I think he'd be fucking good. Did you see the TSMC ban? Oh, yeah. Little news update regarding that. Taiwan noticed that the American chip factories are actually doing pretty well. They're actually doing pretty well. They're like making some high-end stuff. And so Taiwan was like, wait, this is kind of spooky. So they banned it. They said, no. TSMC, you are not allowed to make the highest end stuff outside of Taiwan, because if you do, it's a bad look for all of Taiwan. So again, it's really funny because we've talked about this for, a while now on stream, and it's feel like we're living through history. Like every few weeks, you'll have a big major update on something so important that's happening, on something that's happening around us. It's interesting. It's not all cool, but it's interesting. We're really living through history. Aren't we always? Technically, yes. Of course. But it feels like there's years where nothing happens. But it feels like things are happening. Isn't China preventing manufacturing from leaving China? The reason China did not want to open a BYD plant in Mexico is because they didn't want their technology to get stolen, which is kind of rich coming from China. That's why I was annoyed with some of the comments too that were like, yeah, fucking base China for ignoring IP law. Like, who gives a shit? And it's like, okay, that's a fine stance to have if you're anti-IP law or whatever, but that's not what China thinks. China is very protective of their IP. They're extremely protective of their own. And if it's two Chinese companies in China, they're very good at disputing the allegations and like they have a core system for it. It's not like their stance. Their stance is like, hey, we're going to fucking ignore your IP when it benefits us. Which is fine if you're a Chinese national. It's like, we just want the best for me. But I don't think it's fair to be like, he's got some based ideological take. His take is what's good for me is good for me. The U.S. knew China would steal their IP and still built there. I wouldn't say the U.S. did. I'd say the incentive was usually like the fucked up incentive that we have around CEOs paid in stock on short-term bonuses. We had so many companies where the CEO was paid to hit a certain stock price target short-term. So what they did was we're going to fucking offload all our IP to China, build it in China. Who cares? Because I'll get my bonus. I'll cash out. I'll be rich. And then by the time they have a competitor with all our IP that's destroying us, I'll be gone. That's just short-term thinking that benefits the leader at the expense of the organization, the company. And that wasn't just America. That was, I think there's a great example of Don't laugh. Siemens Trains. Siemens Trains is a huge, is it German? Yeah, it is German. It's a German rail train company, one of the best train constructors in the world, you know, really high knowledge of trains. And they were thinking about going to help China build high-speed rail. China would said, you could only do it. We're going to pay you a lot of money, but you could only do it if you form a joint company in China where you own 49% and we own 51%. And they're like, I think they want to take our technology, but there's so much money now. And so they ended up doing it. So Siemens Trains sets up this joint company in China. They start building high-speed rail there. And pretty soon all of their technology has been aped. It's been yoinked. And now China can build high-speed rail way better and doesn't need them. And so and now they're getting outcompeted elsewhere in the world. So now when Siemens Trains wants to build in, Africa or something, Chinese train companies can come in and outcompete for a better price. So like they kind of fucked up their long term for their short term. And that happened in America and Europe and all over. People did that. Technology transfer is part of the deal. It's not yoinked. Yeah, okay, fine. A different word. But what I'm saying is, had there been a strategic look at it from a long-term aspect in the company, they wouldn't have done it. But because it was for a CEO in the short term, they were able to hurt the employees and the GDP of their own nation to help themselves personally get rich. I'm all for moving IP restrictions. Yeah, but China is not. That's what I'm saying. It is frustrating to hear someone be like, yeah, I so base to be against IP. And it's like, okay, but that's not what they're doing. Just to be clear, that is not what they're doing. They are not on your side. They're not like, yeah, I hate IP. If that's your stance, okay, fine. But they are extremely fiercely protective of their IP. AI becomes sentient 5-minute video? What's this?
Jesus, where
5 million views? But it's 9 years ago. What could it possibly know about AI now? What's this? What the fuck is this? Wait, Movie Pass is coming back? Do you guys know Movie Pass? Do Zoomers know Movie Pass? Movie Pass was a company that had the brilliant idea of you could pay $10 a month to get to watch all the movies in theaters you wanted. So you give them $10 and then they would go and buy a movie ticket for $15 every time you wanted to go. So basically, Movie Pass would just lose money. If you saw a lot of movies, they were just losing a lot of money. It was just based. It was just based for you, the consumer. And they thought if they got big enough, they could like squeeze the theaters or something and get some advantage, but they never did. So you would just pay your $10 a month and go see a bunch of movies, and they would buy a full retail ticket every time and give it to you. There was no magic sauce. It was just selling tickets at a discount. And so they lost a bunch of money. And then one weekend, Mission Impossible 3 comes out, and everybody goes to see it with Movie Pass, and they lost so much money they went bankrupt. That's the story of Movie Pass, one of the dumbest business ideas ever. Anyway, I guess it's back. It's back again with a Betting app for cinephiles. A blockchain oh, good, blockchain. I was called Mogul. Oh, no, Ludwig's involved. Are you gambling on box office results and Oscar awards with fucking crypto? It's a fantasy football league, but for... Dude, they just made fantasy football for theater kids. Everything's becoming DraftKings, dude. That's crazy. That's crazy. Bro, you're going to see Northern Lion do an ad for this in a year and a half. And I will retire with this? Yeah, maybe. Damn, that's fucking crazy. Lecture from Tom Scott about free speech on the internet. I do love Tom Scott. He emailed me once. I don't know if you guys know this. Tom Scott emailed me about, I think I reacted to one of his videos and he liked it. He sent me an email saying he liked my reaction. I don't remember what, this was a while ago. This might have been. Yeah, I can check maybe. Why did Tom Scott email me? But oh, this email. Okay, I want actually, yeah, Tom at tomscott.com. Hi, my name's Tom Scott. Atrioc briefly reacted to one of my videos. I reacted to his video of landing a plane in a simulator. He actually just basically said he had a content ID dispute on a YouTube clip of that reaction and wanted to let him know that he was not trying to whatever, and he took it down. He was like, I like the content. It was like an automatic one. Anyway, that's cool. That's cool. That's based. What a good guy. What a good guy. All right, so let's watch this video. What is this video, you said? Tom Scott video about free speech? Fuck it, dude. Let's learn about free speech from a dashing British boy. It's an hour? No fucking way. I would rather people not be able to speak their mind than have an hour-long YouTube video. I would rather we silence all speech and live in like a dystopia than have hour-long YouTube videos. Aiden has such an interesting take on free speech. What is Aiden's take? I feel like Aiden's take on free speech is that it should be free except when it's like not cool. which is a good take, but also vague. You know, it's also vague. Vibes-based free speech. Yeah, exactly. New baseball doesn't exist videos all about marketing? Pause.
Baseball is a...
No, this is about fucking Savannah Bananas and it's 38 minutes long. Don't try to bait me. Baseball is a... Is there live updates Australian election? Let's see. Can I see a map, a fun map? What if they all just elect a fucking kangaroo? What is this? Let's check Polymarket. It looks like Albanese is at 95.2% chance of victory. It's looking pretty over for my man Voldemort Peter Dutton. I mean, this is a very similar to Canada situation. Even the timeline is the same of this odds. This is just a very Canada situation. Except without a step down. I guess what's interesting is Anthony did not have a step down. He had a Trudeau. Australia uses the inverted color system. I feel like I don't know if all the rest of the world, but all the Commonwealth countries do it inverted. All the UK light. America used to do it too, but some news station flipped the colors and it stuck. It was worse than that. That's really funny. This week is the last week of World War II. Oh, I've seen this channel. It like does week by week reporting of World War II as if you're there, which is kind of funny. Historian.
One of the great Cold War.
Well, this sounds interesting. Historian answers Cold War questions.
Theories for the United States was the so-called domino theory. I'm historian Michael Kimmage. Let's answer your questions from the internet. This is Cold War support.
Ooh, loud.
First question. When did the Cold War start and when did it end? To get to the bottom of this question, I think we should talk about a timeline of the Cold War. 1945, that's the date of the Potsdam Conference on the outskirts of Berlin. That was Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, and Harry Truman. And what you can see is that the two big superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, are beginning to divide up the world in a certain way. You can also
see that they're mogging Churchill. Like, look at this, dude. Look at he's cock-shamed, really. They look proud and confident, and he's like slouched. His posture is bad. Look at this. This is good posture. Smiling, open attitude, arms outstretched. This is defensive. Hat over his dick, dude, protecting himself. No, I could tell. I could tell that Churchill's getting mogged here. Churchill was wasted for sure. I mean, Churchill did his job here, okay? He's actually obviously a great wartime leader, but to my understanding, not very good after that. We didn't last very long after that, but not very good outside. And so this is when his time is done. Or before. No, I mean, he is there's a very credible argument that he is personally a big part of the conditions that created the Great Depression. Not even kidding. Not even kidding. Winston Churchill personally. So he's got a lot to answer for.
Superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union, are beginning to divide up the world in a certain way. You can also see in 1945 the fault lines of disagreement between Stalin and Truman. Let's jump forward to 1960. That's the date that Gary Powers gets intercepted over the Soviet Union. And Khrushchev and Eisenhower, the American president in the 50s, were supposed to have a summit meeting in 1960. That gets blown off course by the U-2 spy incident. So the Cold War is put back on track. And then in the early 1960s, we get the construction of the Berlin Wall, which is the ultimate symbol of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Divided Berlin, divided Germany, divided Europe.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward all the way to 1985. That's the arrival of Mikhail Gorbachev as the General Secretary of the Soviet Union. Gorbachev is a reformer that sets in motion a series of revolutions in Eastern and Central Europe. They culminate in 1989 when Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Hungary break free from Soviet control. 2 years later, 1991, the Soviet Union itself collapses.
Holy fuck, that's my birth year. I always feel so fucking old when someone talks about the year I was born in like a history presentation. It feels so weird. You're talking about the Cold War. It feels so weird. Welcome back, USSR. Yes, I am the living embodiment of the USSR. They died and I was born. That's why I'm glazing China. Yep, you got me.
When the Soviet flag is taken down over the Kremlin and the Russian flag is put up. That's on Christmas Eve, 1991. And with that, the Cold War is definitely over. Writer Jason from Reddit.
Damn, crazy that I was alive for the Cold War. It's kind of base, dude. You fucking Zoomers don't get it. You know what the Cold War was like. I lived through it. I did fucking a tour. If anything, I ended it. If anything, the United States and the Soviet Union had a fucking vicious Cold War for decades, and then I showed up and I was like, stop. Put an end to this. Okay? Enough. And it was done that year. Is that not aura? Is that not? I just said no, enough is enough. Okay? I handed them a Pepsi.
Asks, what was the height of the Cold War? The height of the Cold War was definitely the Cuban Missile Crisis, which took place in the fall of 1962. U.S. oversight spy photography got a missile launch site that was being created on the island of Cuba. This map shows us the scale of what the Soviets and the Cubans had in mind in terms of making Cuba into a Cold War nuclear installation. This wasn't just one or two weapons, this was a pretty big shift. And when you think of how close Cuba is to the US, 90 miles from the tip of the state of Florida, you can understand why this was of such grave concern to American military planners. So it was no small step what Khrushchev was under.
Yeah, but that's Florida. I mean, I get it if it was like right off the coast of Texas or California, but like, okay, they bombed Florida. Are we gonna notice? Is that something we're gonna? It's not even gonna make the news with all the shit coming out of Florida.
They're taking in 1962 in Cuba, it was a pretty big provocation. This caused a huge crisis in the White House, where there was a sense that the US absolutely had to respond. And there was a debate and discussion in the White House about the different options available to President Kennedy at the time. One of them was the outright invasion of Cuba. Another was a kind of diplomatic negotiation discussion with the Soviet Union. The US opted for the latter course. And we know now if the US had invaded that the likelihood of a nuclear strike on the United States is very, very high. The reason that we know that the Cuban Missile Crisis could have gone nuclear really comes from the memories of Fidel Castro, the Cuban leader. He was pressuring the Soviets to respond with nuclear force if the US would have invaded the island. So this is a time when the two superpowers came to the very edge of the abyss, to a nuclear confrontation. The reason the Soviets put the missiles in is they wanted to gain advantage in Europe, not so much in the Caribbean. The Soviets felt that the US was encroaching on the Soviet Union in West Berlin. Khrushchev thought he could get an advantage in the Cold War by doing this. He did it against the advice of his staff. Khrushchev is going to be pushed from power a few years after the Cuban Missile Crisis because of how he behaved during it. It's a Soviet embarrassment, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's something of an American success. Kalechi12 wants to know, was the American fear of world...
JFK handled it pretty damn well. I watched a documentary on it. JFK did it pretty damn well. He wasn't so good at dodging bullets, but outside of that, he had a lot of skills. He had a lot of skills. Trump could do it better. You're so right. We needed someone with the diplomatic tact of Donald Trump to handle the Cuban Missile Crisis. You're so right.
Worldwide communist domination a legitimate fear. I think the US had a lot of legitimate concerns with Soviet power in Europe, but the US blew out of proportion the whole communist story. Let's take a look at this map of the world. It helps us to see that the world divided up in the Cold War into three basic camps. You have the Soviet-Chinese camp on the one hand, you have a US-led camp on the other, and in between you had what were called the non-aligned.
Dude, it's so fun how China was the little bro for so many years, and now Russia is the omega little bro of that relationship. it's like you thought your older brother was cool, and then you grew up and now you're playing in the NBA or something, and your older brother is fucking smoking meth in the garage. The tables have turned so hard. It's unreal how far ahead China is and how they don't have to listen to Russia in any way. And they were always little bro before.
States. One of the great Cold War theories for the United States was the so-called domino theory. And this was the idea that countries were lined up in some kind of sequence, and if one of them would fall to communism, the rest would fall after the first one fell. So the domino theory.
No mods here, please kill that guy. I don't even see a guy to kill. What am I missing? Twitch dashboard. Who is this? Oh, someone asking for PayPal? All right. Following 41 minutes ago. Bro just showed up and started spamming PayPal. Someone being poor in the Atrioc stream, we can't have that. Guys, always be on the lookout for those poorer than you so you can punch down. Okay? The main reason of that is to help you feel better about yourself and your financial situation. Here's the great thing. If you're ever feeling like you, that, you know, the cost of living is going up and you feel stressed about your financial security, just watch a fucking, what's his name? Jacob video. What's his name? Just watch that guy's video and then watch him find somebody more broke than you. Not Jacob Geller. Who am I thinking? Caleb. Watch a Caleb Hammer video where he like makes fun of a poor person with bad financial things and then you feel better about yourself. That's because that's what he's selling. What if you don't feel better? Find someone poorer.
Theory is something that dominates thinking about American Cold War policy for the first 2-3 decades of the Cold War. It is a very simplistic theory, and it contributed to a lot of misunderstandings in American foreign policy. The biggest one is in Vietnam. That's the ultimate domino, where the US feared that if Vietnam fell to communism, Laos, Cambodia, and other neighboring countries would fall as well, and so the US pushed itself into an unnecessary war because of this theory. It's not a footnote or a side note to the Cold War, the domino theory. It's the cause of some of the biggest mistakes that the United States makes during the Cold War.
I mean, Vietnam was one of the biggest mistakes ever, man. God, it was such a stupid thing to do. It just fucked up so much of, You didn't stop it? I was like, no, guys, don't. You're so sexy. I said, no, LBJ, you're so sexy. But it didn't work. It didn't fucking work, bro. I tried my best. Ho Chi Minh's beard was so long, though, for real, for real. Are you saying that we should have invaded Vietnam? Killing a lot of people, losing a lot of American lives, bankrupting the country in a way that forced us to radically change our financial system because Ho Chi Minh's beard was too long and we needed to shave it? Or what do you... Yes, okay. It's not that I oppose your goal. I just think we could have sent in, imagine a young Joe Biden. He's only 60 years old at the time. We put him in all camouflage and we airdrop him in with a razor into Vietnam so that he can sneak in at night and shave the beard himself. That would have been more surgical. Rather than what we did, which was I think ineffective.
7 asks, was there ever something built like Fallout Vault during the Cold War? I think that this person is referencing the show Fallout and the video game Fallout, and absolutely there were Fallout shelters that were built during the Cold War. You can still find some of them in the vicinity of Washington, D.C. You can find lots of them in Europe. You can certainly find them in the Soviet Union. With the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Soviet Union and the U.S.
The Fallout game is real? I can get a fucking Pip-Boy? I can get a Pip-Boy and I can fucking shoot a rad roach? Fucking Batchest!
Came within a hair's breadth of actually having a nuclear war. It was one of the realities that people had to live with then. So governments did all kinds of planning. They had contingency plans. They built places to make government conceivably possible during a nuclear war. But there's something crazy about it.
Mr. Beast did a video in a bunker. Guy who can only believe things are real if Mr. Beast did a video in them. No, tigers are real. I saw Mr. Beast did a video with one. Yeah. For sure. For sure.
At the same time, because if there had been a nuclear war, these Fallout vaults would give you 10, 12 hours of peace, security, and safety, and then the game would still be up. So it was a psychological device, like the duck and cover exercises where students were given instructions of what to do during a nuclear war. It helps us to understand the strength.
The idea of ducking under your wooden desk in case a nuke falls is so funny. It blocks the blast.
Strange psychology that I guess all of us need to have while we live in the nuclear age. First Reformer asks, was Stalin really as evil as people claim? Yes, you could say that Stalin is a gifted statesman for the Soviet Union. He wins the Second World War for the Soviet Union. You could also say that Stalin is a far-thinking state builder for the Soviet Union. It's really Stalin who builds the whole Soviet state, and that's no small matter. But he does so at incredible cost to the peoples of the Soviet Union and to peoples on the periphery of the Soviet Union. This is millions upon millions of lives that were reordered through violence and coercion, through incarceration and through execution. So he's one of the great 20th century villains. At LS Trip 44 asks, WTF, how did the Berlin Wall work? The Berlin Wall worked.
Bros KD was crazy. He's no Dan Clancy, but Stalin was pretty bad. The more you read about Stalin, the more he really was pretty bad. But he's no Dan Clancy. He made COD. You think Joseph Stalin made Call of Duty? When? When did he do that? $1954.
Worked in the following way. We have a depiction of it here. This is the city of Berlin. And after the Second World War in 1945, Germany and Berlin alike were occupied by the Soviet Union, by France, by Britain, and by the United States. And the city of Berlin is divided up into 4 zones. But really, the French, the British, and the US zones are one zone. You could describe that as the western zone of the city, and the Soviet zone was the other part of the city. The Berlin Wall is put up when a lot of East Berliners are flowing into West Berlin. There was a joke at the time, will the last East Berliner turn out the light bulb when they leave the country? Nikita Khrushchev and the Soviets decide that the Berlin Wall has to be there. You could almost describe it as one of the big mistakes that the Soviet Union makes because it symbolizes a part of Europe, a part of Germany, a part of Berlin where people have to be held in. So it becomes...
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad look. It's a bad fucking look, bro. It's a bad look when you got to toss up a wall. You know, it doesn't make the system look great. I think more cities should be divided in 2 down the middle, though. I think it'd be fun. They'd make their own little cultures. I feel like if you split fucking LA down the middle, and then came back in 20 years, it would be fucking wild. Lakers versus Clippers. Dude, the Lakers half of the city and the Clippers half, and somehow traffic would double despite having less cars. That'd be fucking sick.
Comes this big Cold War symbol, John F. Kennedy goes to Berlin and gives his famous Ich bin ein Berliner speech to show that West Berliners were free and East Berliners were not. The Berlin Wall runs through the center of the city. At the same time, it runs around the whole western part of Berlin. It was concrete.
You could make the real argument that JFK was the last great president. That we had a string of great presidents in a row that ended with JFK, and then ever since then, they've been getting pretty shite. I would maybe Clinton. I would say for his faults, Bill Clinton is a break from everyone else in that era. Obama, I'm not really an Obama defender, bro. I think he's a good speaker. I think he did some things. I'm not a hater. I don't think he's the worst. But why was Clinton so good? I mean, obviously I'm biased towards booming economy and financial stability. I think those things create overall, obviously there's always somebody who's suffering, always. In any time in human history. So it's hard. You can always find something, but I think he created a broad, good time in America. A broad, good time. And he balanced the budget in a way that no one has post-Reagan of any president. He balanced it, dude. We had a fucking surplus. And he handed that surplus to George W. Bush, and George W. Bush said, okay, we're going to tax cut and go to war. And then we've never came close ever, and get a recession. He said, we're going to tax cut, we're going to go to war, and we're going to get the Great Recession. And ever since then, it's been fucking... He kind of got lucky, with the internet bubble. You're absolutely right to bring that up. It is a factor. But I think he made a concerted effort to consistently try to balance the budget, to spend what we taxed, rather than put it on to future generations. Who actually is your favorite president? My favorite president is FDR. And my second favorite president is Eisenhower, who's a Republican. Okay? I like both the tax and spend liberal of FDR, and I like the fucking financially conservative, back to basics Eisenhower. I think they both did a fucking great... I think their combination was the power. And those two presidents did such a good job that it, in part, not only them, but in part of them, created 30 years of true prosperity, the greatest middle class that has ever existed in any country ever. All Eisenhower had to do was not blow up what FDR did. That's not a fair comparison, because FDR had what you might, I wouldn't say the easy part, but he had the part where he goes, hey, we're in a depression. We're just going to borrow as much as we fucking can to get this shit moving again. And he did. He borrowed and he spent. But then what Eisenhower did was, after that, he did the only person to ever do the true Keynesian thing, which is during good times, pay down the debt. He's the only person to do that. Eisenhower followed up by saying, okay, we're going to keep these things. We're going to keep Social Security. We're going to keep these labor rules. We're going to keep this, minimum wage. We're going to keep all this stuff. And we're going to balance our budget and pay down the debt. So Eisenhower was great, man. Eisenhower was a hero. I think the combination of both of them is great. Now we don't do that. We don't have an Eisenhower. What about Van Buren? Who was the president that gave the speech on their opening day in the rain and then died 30 days later because of pneumonia? Who's that president? That guy was fucking Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison. That guy was the GOAT, dude. In and out, you know? Show up, leave him wanting more. That guy was oral farming.
Was a tall wall with watchtowers. It looked very menacing. It's full of barbed wire as well. And you also have East German border guards with the right to shoot who were there at the wall to prevent people from crossing it. And there were quite a few people who died at the Berlin Wall who were shot or killed when they were trying to escape. So what goes up can also come down. In 1989, you have a press conference where an East German official bungles what he was supposed to say. He was supposed to talk about eventual travel rights. He talks about immediate travel rights. That evening, people rush out to the Berlin Wall and cross over it. And they dance and party at the Berlin Wall, November 1989. This is one of the great symbolic moments of the Cold War. It's not until 2 years later, 1991, that the Soviet Union collapses. But emotionally, the Cold War ends when the Berlin Wall is breached. This next question is from the Ask Historians subreddit. Why was the downing of Gary Powers' U-2 such a major international incident? Gary Powers' U-2 spy plane was flying over the Soviet Union. It got detected, it got intercepted. Gary Powers parachuted out of the plane. He didn't commit suicide, as his instructions may have required him to do, and he was captured as a trophy by the Soviet Union and paraded before world media to show that the United States was doing its dirty business in Soviet airspace, and the Soviet Union was the victim, protecting itself, defending itself from American aggression. The Cold War was, at its very core, a battle over images, perception, and narrative. So this was a propaganda victory for the Soviet Union. There were a ton of spy planes during the Cold War. The Soviets, of course, had many, and the United States had many. What they were trying to figure out was what the nuclear facilities were in the other country, and especially they were trying to figure out how many nuclear weapons the other country had and where they were stationed. This is before you really have satellite technology. At that time, U-2 spy planes and the like were the state of the art. Rex Saved asked, how did the Red Scare and McCarthyism affect US politics during the Cold War? Was it reasonable? The Red Scare really was not reasonable. This is around 1950. Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin. Sitting next to him is Roy Cohn, who was one of his assistants from 1950 to 1954, when McCarthy's reign of terror was in full effect. Roy Cohn is a famous figure in American history, second half of the 20th century, because he would end up being a mentor to Donald Trump when Donald Trump was on the rise in New York City. Roy Cohn is depicted in a recent film, The Apprentice. The Red Scare was a response to something real. The Soviet Union had some success infiltrating the State Department in the 1930s, and most consequentially, the Soviet Union got a few nuclear secrets from Julius Rosenberg in the 1940s with the access that Julius Rosenberg had to Los Alamos, where the atomic bomb was being worked on. So those were facts, but they were created into something really monstrous by Senator Joseph McCarthy when he accused all kinds of people who had nothing to do with this espionage of communist affinity and communist affiliation. And these people could be in academia, they could be in journalism, and sometimes just to be accused of doing something wrong, even if there were no facts behind it, was enough to ruin people's reputation. That means you could become unemployable.
Yeah, I mean, there was that Bryan Cranston had a film, Trumbo. He's like a filmmaker or a writer. I forget what he's about, but it was, it does a pretty good job of showing how even the association, even the accusation could ruin your life or make you impossible to make money. And then, it's not pronounced Wumbo.
And the most famous examples of that are in Hollywood, where various directors and creative people were denied jobs, careers were interrupted, or in some cases outright ruined by being blacklisted. It was a technique of creating fear, of making people intimidated, making them afraid to speak their minds, and in a way, trying to guarantee consent or guarantee support for the US government. It's a very unfortunate episode in American politics. Agent P501212 asks, I don't understand the collapse of the Soviet Union. How does a government fall without any violence? It's one of the most mysterious historical events. It's the collapse of a huge nuclear-powered, affluent up to a point, empire.
Dap up Lenin. Dude. Lenin looks high as fuck. This is POV when your boy goes in for a dap when you're fucking toasted. That is big Chungus Lenin, dude. The perspective looks so weird with his hand.
Empire in 1991 for really no apparent or obvious reason.
The apparent reason was that I was born. Okay, as I said, 1991. I said we're done with this shit. End it. Fucking let's move on.
Had to give an explanation, I would say that the Soviet Union was a very strange patchwork quilt of different ethnicities and nations. What held it together when Stalin assembled the Soviet Union in the 1920s and 30s was coercion and violence. Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power in 1985 and basically says, we want to run the Soviet Union without power and violence. And what happens is that the nation states of the Soviet Union, including the Russian nation state, basically say, we no longer wish to be a part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union collapses. It was oddly constructed, could only be held together through violence.
Okay, I think this misses a really, really interesting story of what happened at the collapse of the Soviet Union, which is that Gorbachev here, yeah, he made the reforms, and the reforms were, you know, getting rid of the power and the violence and the coercion that held everything together, sure. And he's not very popular for these reforms because things are still kind of broken. So he's making these reforms that make it easier to speak out, but hasn't actually made things better. So everyone's speaking out about how shitty it is, but now they can't even be pressured to be silent. So he's not very good, right? And he gets kidnapped. He gets put under house arrest by a hardliner group of older communists who want to bring things back to the power and coercion era. He gets fucking kidnapped. Like they put him under house arrest, and then they go on TV, like national TV, and they're broadcasting this basically soft coup. He's still alive. He's still alive. He's in the house arrest. They have this soft coup, but the soft coup is terrible. It's like, apparently, you know, the way it's described to me is like, you know, it's a live feed, not edited, and they're like, their hands are shaking and they're all fucking old and they don't project power at all. And then it can't even say whether or not they're going to like actually arrest or kill Gorbachev. They're just like, we need to make our demands heard. And so it's this weird, like bad, and already everyone's upset and mad, right? So then, they have the Soviet tanks go to the I don't know what the Capitol building is called or the White House equivalent, but like that is where Boris Yeltsin is, and Kremlin, I'm sorry. And Boris Yeltsin, who ends up being the president of actual Russia, is like the guy that comes out and he like laughs and chats with the guys in the tank. And he's like, you're not going to shoot us, are you? And you get this iconic photo of them like on the tank. And it's like, it kind of like ends the whole idea that they're going to have any threat. And you know, Yeltsin's not that great a guy actually, but he giga chads it in this moment. And then Gorbachev is freed. He comes out and he's like, all right, I'm back. And he expects to be welcomed with open arms and just be the leader again. But everyone's kind of vibe check moved on. It really just is like this weird vibe moment where everyone's like, nah, we like kind of fuck with Yeltsin now. I think it's all over. I'm not kidding. It's essentially what happens. It's like this fucking, this weird little mini coup sets off a vibe check that sets off everyone going like, let's just end it. And then obviously, you know, a lot of shit goes south in Russia pretty quickly still. I mean, it was already bad, but, and then Yeltsin leads to Putin.
As we want to run the Soviet Union without power and violence. And what happens is that the nation states of the Soviet Union, including the Russian nation state, basically say, we no longer wish to be a part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union collapses. It was oddly constructed, could only be held together through violence and coercion. When that violence and coercion was lifted, the whole thing went up in a puff of smoke. Blonde Lady 2024 asks, so what did we really learn from the JFK files? Now, there was no huge breakthrough with the JFK files, but I think that we learned that there was actually quite a bit of back and forth between the United States and the Soviet Union about the figure of Lee Harvey Oswald. We think of the Iron Curtain as this wall that you couldn't cross between East and West, but it wasn't the case. These are two countries that often enough did diplomacy with one another, the big summit meetings and the gatherings, but also behind the scenes, they seem to have been in touch and been communicating with one another. That's a bit of a Cold War surprise. Lee Harvey Oswald is fascinating, not just because he's the assassin of John F. Kennedy, but because he's one of these in-between figures of the Cold War. He was an American citizen, but he lived in the Soviet Union. He had a Russian wife. Lee Harvey Oswald was an international man of mystery, and he was definitely noticed by both the United States and the Soviet Union. I think they may have had suspicions that he was on the other side, that he was an American spy for the Soviets or a Soviet spy, and I guess you could come up with all kinds of arguments that make both of those theories seem plausible. We've never had a biographer or a historian exactly explain.
I was alive for this, so I'm going to tell you what actually happened. This is the first truthful reveal of what happened to JFK. And it's kind of a sad story. JFK was in the back of the car, right? And he asked the Secret Service agent if he could see his gun, because he's actually really good with guns, he said. And the Secret Service agent was like, are you sure? Like, are you trained with this? And then JFK was like, bro, I shoot guns all the time. I'm fucking sick like that. And then he grabbed the gun wrong like an idiot, hit it like a doofus, and then shot himself. He said, watch this. And everybody was so, like, they wanted to protect his memory that they had to, like, make up this whole story. JFK didn't kill himself, like, not on purpose. It was mostly a goofy accident. He was trying to trick shot. Was it a 360? Yeah, he was kind of trying to do that. Same, I was hanging out with Lee Harvey at the time of the shooting. Yeah, that guy was fucking chill. He didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah, no, you're right. I'm sorry. Remember, he had the gun on his finger and he's like, watch this. He was trying to do a cool spin move, but when he spun it, it just fucking right in the head. And it was like, oh no. Oh no.
Explain what he was up to, and there's just a lot of tidbits in the JFK files about who he was, what the Soviets knew, what the US government knew, and although both governments knew a lot, it seems never to be enough. Salmonella on YouTube asks, how historically accurate is The Americans? I think The Americans is pretty historically accurate. There are a lot of those sleeper cells that were implanted in the United States and in other countries and never quite activated. There are a few literary liberties that The Americans takes. First of all, I think all the sex and violence that you see in The Americans was not really what the experience of the actual sleepers was. And also what historians have noted about these different sleeper cells is that they delivered very little usable information for the Soviet Union. So the best moles for the Soviet Union were not really from the Soviet Union as you see depicted in The Americans. What they were sympathizers and loyalists to the Soviet Union who were actual American citizens. And the most important example of this would be Julius Rosenberg, who did steal nuclear secrets for the Soviet Union. His wife Ethel Rosenberg, the two of them were executed for nuclear espionage. Also in the 70s and 80s, you have a few moles as well. They weren't really sympathetic to the Soviet cause, but they were taking money and in return giving the Soviet Union secrets. Famous example of an American mole is Aldrich Ames, who was working in the FBI. The Soviet Union was giving money to him. He was giving secrets to the Soviet Union. At extension 4159 asks, every time I mention Ronald Reagan to my father.
Dude, I feel like being, at least at that time, being a mole, such an easy job. You could just make up the secrets. You know? You could just make it up. You could just say some shit. Just fucking get the money and like, how can they verify? You could say anything. They're building a giant hat. Yeah, Stalin. No, I'm serious. Yeah, they're building a giant hat. Yeah, they're doing that. It's much easier than being a Twitch streamer. Oh yeah.
He says that he quote unquote arguably won the Cold War. Was Reagan's presidency an important factor?
You're not the only one working as a mole so they can cross verify. That's when you get the other moles in on it, bro. That's the trick. What I would do is I would walk around the FBI and I would go, any moles? And then I would find my other fellow agents and we would fucking make a union and we would agree to make up information in exchange for cash money. Mole says what?
Factor in ending the Cold War. Reagan opened the door to the peaceful resolution of the Cold War. He conducted a lot of diplomacy with Mikhail Gorbachev, and Reagan was careful not to push too far, to push the Soviet Union beyond a threshold where it might have responded with war or military force. Technically speaking, it's George Herbert Walker Bush who's president when the Cold War comes to an end, and George Herbert Walker Bush was also good at giving a peaceful ending to the Cold War. So I would say that the Soviet Union falls apart for reasons that are internal to the Soviet Union. It's not that the US was really able to pull the plug, but the US plays a big role in navigating and managing that moment and making sure that the end of the Cold War was not a bloody war or a disaster, but a surprisingly peaceful event. Anti-imperialist Marie asks, why did Gorbachev betray socialism despite growing up under socialist conditions? Mikhail Gorbachev comes to power in the Soviet Union in 1985, really wanting to save socialism. Mikhail Gorbachev really believed in the teachings and the writings of Vladimir Lenin. He wanted to bring the Soviet Union back to what he felt were its glorious beginnings. The only way he felt he could do so after 1985 was through reform. Gorbachev's reforms quickly run out of his control. The economy continues to unravel and get worse while he's the general secretary of the Soviet Union. That creates a lot of discontent within the Soviet Union. but it's really not for reasons of socialism or capitalism or economics that the Soviet Union falls apart. It's because Gorbachev couldn't manage the different nationalities within the Soviet Union. There were two buzzwords that were associated with Gorbachev. One is perestroika, restructuring, and the other is glasnost, giving people voice and agency. But what's interesting about both of these things is that people started to pull the economy in a free market direction, which is not what Gorbachev wanted. And with glasnost, with voice and agency, people began to articulate across the Soviet Union a desire to break free from the Soviet Union itself. This is Russians, Lithuanians, Ukrainians, and others. And so Gorbachev wanted to give people a measure of power. He bungles the question of nationalities within the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union falls.
And then fucking 2 years later, he's in a Pizza Hut commercial. How's that for cultural victory? Holy fuck. The way I heard about the direct impacts of glasnost was through that fucking book, Patriot, Navalny's book, where he just talks about growing up under it. And it was like, you couldn't say shit. You weren't allowed to criticize anything. And then one day you were, and then everyone started doing it. And suddenly it was like, oh, they don't know what they've opened. Now everyone was openly shit-talking the situation, and then things were getting out of hand real quick. He took one bite and became a capitalist. The Soviet Union fell in 1991 when Gorbachev had a slice of delicious deep dish pizza from Pizza Hut, single-handedly collapsing the Berlin Wall. The shit went so dummy, it was like Ratatouille. It was like the Ratatouille bite, dude, and it single-handedly ended the Cold War. That's why they call it the domino theory.
Apart. It's an incredible case of unintended consequences. But let's remember Gorbachev for what he was trying to do, and that, for better or worse, was to save the socialist idea. Nate Nando's 21 asks, why did the CIA destabilize so many governments during the Cold War? The official mandate of the CIA in the 1940s and 50s was to be very aggressive. Regime change, coups d'etats, high degrees of espionage, manipulation in domestic politics was par for the course. And what the CIA would have said if they had been able to answer the question in the 40s and 50s is that the Soviet Union was doing the same thing. So what the Soviet Union was doing, we had to do as well. There are three good examples of governments that the US interfered with, meddled with, manipulated during the early stages of the Cold War. The first is Italy, where the US put its thumb on the scales and tried to get the non-communist political parties elected after World War II. Second is Guatemala, where the CIA was actively involved in overthrowing the government. And the third is Iran. The overthrow of the government in Iran that the CIA and British intelligence was a part of creates a very strongly anti-American mood in Iran in the 1960s and 70s,
Yikes.
and that culminates in the Iranian Revolution of 1979. So a famous term that's connected to CIA overthrow operations is blowback, the bad things that happen when you overthrow foreign governments. And the most spectacular example of blowback in modern American history is Iran. We're living with the effects of that in the present day. At Creatively asks, where did the hammer and sickle come from? This question takes us back into the early part of the 20th century. You have the Russian Revolution in 1917. That topples the empire of the czars. When the Soviet Union was created, it needed to show to itself and to the outside world what it represented, and so the Soviet Union came up with the hammer and sickle that you see on this flag. The hammer and the sickle represented the two pillars of the Soviet economy. The sickle was agriculture, the hammer was industry. Now, in reality, these were two parts of the Soviet experiment that didn't always fit very well together, but symbolically, the idea was to show that these were two integrated, harmonious parts of the Soviet economy, and this is what was lifting up.
What would our two items be on the American flag today? One would be short-form video scrolling. And the other would be a burger and gun. Burger and gun. It would be somebody gambling on DraftKings and someone taking a hit of a Juul. YouTube Shorts and iPhone and truck. We don't actually make the iPhone. I like that, but we don't make the iPhone. What? Burger's one of them.
The Soviet Union into a great...
It would be a burger and LeBron James, you're right.
Great world power and a great superpower. I Like Corn asks, were China and Russia allies, hashtag frenemies? China and Russia were both. They were allies for quite a while during the Cold War. China models itself on Stalin's Soviet Union and was a close partner of the Soviet Union in the 1950s in ways that drove the United States absolutely crazy. And then in the early 1960s, you get something called the Sino-Soviet split. And this was Chairman Mao separating himself from the Soviet Union, becoming more autonomous. It was a border dispute between the Soviet Union and China, and that really issued in a lot of tension between these two countries. And so you get Richard Nixon going to China in the early 1970s to triangulate the Cold War, not make it a US-Soviet binary, but make it a US-Soviet-Chinese triangle. But that's only possible because the Soviet Union and China became really frenemies or enemies in the early 1960s. Here's one from the Ask Historians subreddit. Why is Kissinger considered a foreign policy genius? First thing to say is not everybody considers Kissinger a genius. There are some people who think of Kissinger as one of the villains of the Cold War. This has to do with the aggressive policies that Kissinger supported, especially in Latin America. What Kissinger was trying to do is to buy the United States time after the Vietnam War, and diplomacy was the answer. So there's a lot to argue about with Kissinger, and people have been arguing about him ever since he was National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. But for those who admire him, it's for his diplomatic skill. Malice6708 wants to know, why did the USSR invade Afghanistan? So this is one of the things that sinks the Soviet Union. It invades because it had a communist partner in Afghanistan. It invades because Afghanistan is, as we've learned in the last couple of decades, a pretty strategic country. And it invades because it could. It had the military.
It's because they didn't understand the power of the brave Mujahideen. It was their biggest mistake. Okay? Kush. They wanted to smoke the Kush.
Power. None of this is great reasoning on the Soviet part. Soviet Union is very quickly led into a quagmire in Afghanistan. The US supports the Mujahideen on the other side and incurs a lot of costs on this part of the Soviet Union. And most importantly, the Afghanistan war creates a lot of discontent within the Soviet Union. People in the Soviet Union really do not want to fight in Afghanistan. Many of them come home and they start to push against Soviet rule. So in the end...
Dude, it's so fucking cosmically crazy that the United States successfully is able to get or help the Soviet Union get locked into a quagmire in Afghanistan. It's mostly of their own making. See how terrible it is for them, their troops, their economy, their morale. Total disaster. And then within Joe Biden's lifetime, we're back in Afghanistan. We're doing the same thing. We are doing this. We are locked into a quagmire. How do you watch that mistake happen and then do it? It's, are you gonna finish that? It'll work for us. 2 decades later, yeah, it's not even that far. In terms of a human life, it's not even that long of a time to be like, okay, well, we'll do it though. They thought it was a skill issue. They said, I understand it now. Watch this drive. Pass it here, little bro. Let me show you how it's done.
And it's a disaster for the Soviet Union. There's also big blowback for the United States in Afghanistan because the Mujahideen forces that the US supports in the 1980s in Afghanistan, this is a CIA-run operation, later become linked to Osama bin Laden and the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States. That's, of course, long after the Cold War, but it's another reminder that the world of the Cold War, it's ancient history in one respect, but it's also the world that we're still living in another. Venturin asks, what is your favorite Cold War movie? My favorite Cold War movie by far is a movie called 1, 2, 3 by Billy Wilder. I wish it was better known. It's a really funny movie. It's a comedy about Berlin, and it's filmed before the Berlin Wall goes up, so you see people going in cars and taxis between East and West Berlin. It satirizes the United States, which is trying to sell Coca-Cola in Europe, and it satirizes the Soviet Union, which is this very heavy-handed, dominant military force in Germany and in Berlin. And basically what it does is turn the whole Cold War into a series of really funny jokes about how the two sides make some of the same mistakes and do some of the same stupid things. One fascinating movie that takes us back to the spirit of the 1980s is a movie called Red Dawn, which is about a Soviet invasion of the United States. I don't know if it's a great movie in cinema terms, but it helps us to understand the fears.
Dude, wasn't there a Red Dawn game where they made it a Chinese invasion of America, and then they were worried that they wouldn't be able to sell the game in China, so they changed it to North Korea? Or was it a movie game? That's so funny. As if North Korea has the troop size to do a paratrooper invasion of the Western United States.
politics and the anxieties that were such an important part of the history of the Cold War, but also the Cold War classic Dr. Strangelove, which takes the whole story of nuclear weapons actually in a very careful, considered, and thoughtful way, and makes us realize that a lot of the people who could control these weapons could also be crazy. But it also spins a certain tragedy from the fact that it's humans who are in control of nuclear weapons, and that's one of the scariest things about these.
Dude, the movie's actually really funny. Dr. Strangelove. I know it's black and white and you're thinking it's a snoozer. I watched it with someone recently in a hotel room. We were like on a trip. We were waiting for something. Where did I watch it? Oh, I watched it at Genesis with Bobby Scar and all the smashers I was staying with. We just watched it. This is recently. I don't know why we watched. It was a shock. I thought I was so ready to not like it. I was like, dude, why are we picking this snoozer? Let's watch The Matrix. Honestly, I was like, I didn't want to watch it. It was actually really funny. It was good. It was fucking good. It was funny. Dude, it ends with them, like the nuclear war the nuclear bombs about to drop and the world about to end. And everyone's like, oh, it's all fucking over. But then some guy's like, well, yeah, but we can get all the world's hottest women and go hole up in a bunker. And then they're all like, hell yeah. This, it's like how it ends. It's, it's so insane. Yeah, we must not allow a mine shaft gap. It's very funny. It actually made me laugh quite a few times. And it was pretty funny. I'll say it was good. Maybe it's a little slow for if your brain's got normal amount of rot, but because I started out and I was like kind of like snoozing, and then as I got more into it, I started really enjoying it. It's really funny.
It makes us realize that a lot of the people who could control these weapons could also be crazy, but it also spins a certain tragedy from the fact that it's humans who are in control of nuclear weapons, and that's one of the scariest things about these weapons. Here's a question from Quora. Is NATO a Cold War relic? It certainly represents a world that existed in the Cold War and no longer exists. NATO was created in the late 1940s to defend Western Europe against the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had its own structure on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and that was called the Warsaw Pact. So originally NATO was a handful of...
When was this uploaded? 3 days ago? It feels outdated. Russia is currently invading Ukraine. Is it that crazy to have a strategic military alliance?
Countries in Western Europe, and that's how it remained until 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. After that, NATO expanded to a lot of new countries in Eastern and Central Europe. Now, NATO has still not been attacked all the way down to 2025, but what you have now is a hot shooting war right on the border, flush up against NATO at the present moment in Ukraine. Ukraine borders Romania, Slovakia, and Poland. Those are all NATO states, and so NATO is much closer to an active war in the present moment than it ever was during the Cold War. At Geopolitics 101 asks, are we in a new Cold War today? Absolutely. We have some of the same fault lines. The East-West dichotomy is there. Washington on one side and Moscow on the other. We've got all kinds of tensions, and there are a lot of global
Beijing
consequences of the current tensions that are felt in Latin America, in Asia, in the Middle East, and Africa. The thing that reminds us most of the Cold War at the present moment is that there is a nuclear component to these tensions. There's a roller coaster at the present moment when it comes to U.S.-Russian relations. You have summit meetings. Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin in the summer of 2021, and in recent weeks you've seen a fair amount of conversation, phone calls, and also summitry between Putin's Russia and the United States. But this is not unlike the Cold War, one has to say, because the Cold War was a roller coaster. You had lots of back and forth between the United States and the Soviet Union, and you had periods of really bleak confrontation, followed by phases of diplomacy. That's very similar to the present moment. At the same time, you could argue that the moment that we're in now is in fact worse than the Cold War, because you never really had a shooting war where the US and the Soviet Union were as directly involved as both the US and today's Russia are involved in the war in Ukraine. And so it's the Cold War today, but it's possibly worse than the Cold War was back in the day. Phantom Drive asks, during the Cold War, did the Soviet Union possess any technologies that surpassed those of NATO and the United States? Absolutely. Soviet Union was a powerhouse in science, engineering, mathematics. The biggest moment in this case is the Sputnik satellite that was launched in 1957, the first satellite to be put up in space, and this caused a tremendous commotion in the United States when it was clear that in at least a few areas the Soviet Union was ahead of the United States technologically. The US response to that was to pour money into science research, into universities, and into education. The National Science Foundation is connected to this effort, and so that's a turning point in the Cold War in 1957. The US does certainly certainly catch up by 1969 with the moon launch, but really where the US begins to outpace the Soviet Union technologically is in the private sector, and that's with microchip technology and computing technology, so that by the 1970s and 1980s, the Soviet Union is way behind and just unable to catch up, especially where microchips are concerned. And if the Soviet Union loses the Cold War, if you can put it that way, it loses for that reason. Fat Cat 9000 wants to know, why did the USA and USSR make so many nukes? This question takes us to the heart of the Cold War. Cold War was always about perception of the other side. So if the US had a new weapon, the Soviet Union had to take note, and it felt that it had to compete. By the early 1950s, both sides have the capacity to completely destroy the other, but they feel the need for more nuclear submarines, nuclear weapons that you can deliver with airplanes. So you have a massive arms race between these two countries where huge amounts of money and scientific research goes into nuclear weaponry because each side was always afraid of the other gaining an advantage. It was deeply irrational. It sinks the Soviet Union into a kind of relative poverty by the 1970s, 1980s, and that's one of the reasons that the Soviet Union collapses. The US is more fortunate in this regard, but you can think of a lot of better purposes that the federal money could have been spent during the Cold War than on nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Bigger nuclear weapons. Keep it up with the Joneses moment. Yeah, it does feel like they were trying to like hang out with their rich friends and buy a nice Gucci bag. We could have built a giant hat. We could have built a giant hat. That would have been fucking sick. A giant burger. I mean, we shouldn't have not gone for a nuclear victory. We should have gone for the cultural victory and built a giant burger and then shipped it to Russia. And once they tasted a bite of that, they would have ended the war. Every school gets an edible mascot.
We live in the world that's created by the Cold War in this respect, and it's a world that has far too many nuclear weapons for its own good. At Hootner wants to know, does anyone understand why it was called the Cold War? I'd imagine no one does. Well, at Hootner, actually, we do know the answer to this question, somebody named Walter Lippmann, and he published a book of essays in the mid-1940s about what was happening in the world, and he called it the Cold War. I think he had in mind that this was a real military conflict. The United States and the Soviet Union were going head-to-head, but because of nuclear weapons, they were going to hold back somewhat, and that's what made the war cold. But I also think that Walter Lippmann
without even knowing that historical context of who wrote it, that's also just obvious from the name, the Cold War, which also plays out in what happened in real life. It actually just makes sense.
They have had the Soviet Union in mind, which is a cold place, and that also contributed to this idea of it being a Cold War. At Pocket Butter wants to know, was the Cold War actually about the economic ideologies of capitalism versus communism, or is there evidence to suggest that this was a false pretense for a simple power struggle between two superpowers? I think it was both. The Cold War was very much a struggle about capitalism and communism. These were two systems of governance, two systems of economics, and the Soviet Union and the United States were always trying to show that their system was the best system. But behind this, there was a geopolitical struggle for preeminence in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, and in Africa. But the way that they competed was through this language of communism and capitalism. At Alice F. Short asks, what is a proxy war? What were some proxy wars during the Cold War? Although the Soviet Union and the United States had their daggers drawn, they never fought actively against one another. Instead, what they did was fight proxy wars. They encouraged conflicts and got involved in conflicts where they would be on the opposite sides of each other, but the proxies were there to wage the wars themselves. The most important is the Korean War at the beginning, where you have North Korea and South Korea as the two proxies. We have Afghanistan, and then of course the Vietnam War is also a classic proxy war. Lots of US military infiltration into the countries of Latin America, South America that are there to combat the influence of the Soviet Union. Those are proxy wars. You have in Africa proxy wars around Angola and Mozambique. They were costly, they were very bloody, they were often inconclusive. They created huge resentment across the world from people who suffered from these wars, and we live often in the legacy and the history of those grievances and those resentments. The first time that the US really knocks off several hundred Russian soldiers, not Soviet, but Russian, is actually in Syria in 2018. And of course, the US is very directly involved in the war in Ukraine, and it's US weaponry and military assistance that's resulting in the death of Russian soldiers, but that's of course something that begins in 2022. So the world that we live in now is less of a proxy war world than the world of the Cold War. Jesus asks, how come we don't talk about the Korean War as much. The reason is that the United States didn't win the Korean War, and it didn't lose the Korean War, and in a sense, the Korean War never comes to an end. The Korean War is the first big hot war of the Cold War. It begins in 1950 when you have disputes between the United
It is crazy how many people died in the Korean War and how intense it was. If you look at the map of the Korean War, like if you look at the map of the Korean War, oh, fill this in. If this is the Korean Peninsula, this looks like a dick. This is not a dick. This is not a hanging dong. You know, at some points, well, I can't. Okay, I'll just try. At some points, this is all that's left of the South Korean side. Okay? And like they're almost about to sail away. They're almost about to sail away. Okay? And at some points, it's like all the way up here. And the North Koreans have pushed it, and then it gets pushed back. But like there's millions of people dying at every stage of this war, and it ends up right here. Anyway, see a doctor. Circumcision.
United States on the one hand and China and the Soviet Union on the other. That breaks down in a geographic way where the Chinese and the Soviets support the northern part of Korea and the US supports the south. So today's North Korea and today's South Korea are direct legacies of that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't think my drawing was perfect enough. Time-lapse Korean War. This is better. Look at this. Watch this. Look at this, dude. Look how close it was to being totally over. And already 200,000 people dead. And this is the very beginning.
일대 부국 대책을 강구하지 않는다면 우리는 전 조선 인민들과 후손들에게 대하여
Now we're at like near 500,000 people dead, and it's pushed over this way.
전투에 있을 수 없는
And it's basically almost over. On this way.
죄를 짓는다는 것을 각오하여야 하겠습니다.
Communist forces attacked the Republic of Korea.
Now we're at like 1 million dead. 1 year, 1 million dead.
This attack has made it clear beyond all doubt that the international communist movement is willing to use armed invasion to conquer independent nations. The invasion of the Republic of Korea was a direct challenge to the principles of the United Nations. That challenge was met by an overwhelming...
And now we're at 2 million dead in 2 years. I mean, it's crazy. This is just a fucking infinite bloodbath right here.
Response.
우리 인민이 성취한 위대한 역사적 승리입니다.
Think of those who were called upon to lay down their lives in that far-off land to prove once again that only courage and sacrifice can keep freedom alive upon the earth.
And that's how it ends. Isn't that crazy? And it's not even really talked about that much, the Korean War. Like there should be movies on it.
That conflict, it's not over, but you're right, it's not talked about as much as it should be. Roberto Carlos asks, why was the Hungarian uprising of 1956 significant to the Cold War? Hungarian uprising in 1956 is when Hungary, which was under Soviet control, tried to break free, and Soviet...
MASH was about it. It's funny that the TV show MASH, lasted longer than the actual Korean War by a lot. The show was so much more successful.
Tanks rolled into Budapest and other places in Hungary to keep Hungary within the Soviet fold. It's really important, not because the Hungarians won, they didn't, and not because the US supported Hungary directly, the United States didn't. It's important because this is the first big break from Soviet control in Eastern and Central Europe. It's only 25 years later that the rest of the countries of Eastern Europe are going to break free from the Soviet Union. It's the first Soviet domino to fall, in a certain sense. Hungary wobbles in 1956, but all of the dominoes begin to fall in 1989. To Robert asks, why was the KGB more successful than the CIA? If the KGB really was more successful, and it's hard to say that the KGB achieved really great things for the people of the Soviet Union or anywhere else, it was because the KGB had more firepower, and certainly within the Soviet Union, more repressive tools than the CIA. I think that the KGB was also a little bit more shameless in pursuing what are called active measures, efforts to instill disinformation, manipulate media information throughout the Cold War. The CIA did some of that, but then there were restrictions, things like a free media and congressional oversight, which didn't always rein in the CIA by any means, but at times curtailed its power. So the CIA did have to contend with revelations that came sometimes from the US government and sometimes from the US media. KGB was able to operate under a much, much thicker cloak of secrecy. From the Ask History subreddit comes the question, how did America taking away all the radios in Europe and making a radio-free Europe help its Cold War efforts? Radio-free Europe wasn't about taking people's radios away. What it was about was using radios in Eastern and Central Europe to give them a message and to provide them with media coverage that they couldn't have gotten in their own countries or gotten from Soviet media apparatuses. So it's part of the Cold War struggle, and from the US side, it was felt that this paid a lot of dividends. It created discontent within the Soviet side and also encouraged various dissident and opposition movements, especially in the 70s and 80s. And Radio Free Europe has been in the media in the last week because the US is either going to...
Does everyone in Europe still use radios to watch Twitch? I'm not familiar with Europe's technology status, but are all my European viewers, are you here on Radio Free Europe? They still hand crank them? Well, that's different. I know they're hand cranking, but nothing to do with the radio.
Defund it or seriously limit its funding. It's very much not a priority of the Trump administration. And so if we're looking for ways to talk about how the Cold War ended, Radio Free Europe survives a couple of decades after the Cold War, but not forever. It's coming to an end now. So those are all the questions for today. Thanks for watching.
I like that. That was good. I thought he had good takes. I mean, I thought the part about a modern Cold War not mentioning China was kind of crazy, but I will wrap there. Chat, thanks for watching. It was just a fun, chill stream. Good talking, good vibes. Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. Those were good videos. Good suggestions. I enjoyed them. Do a quick rap about what you learned today. Yo, my name's Atrioc, and I'm here to say the Soviet Union collapsed in a major way. Hip, hop, hip, hop, hip, hip, hop. Don't stop and rockin'